The views and opinions expressed by tonight's guest and topic of discussion do not necessarily represent the official policy or position of Spaced Out Radio, Spaced Out Weekend, Spaced Out Radio Limited, its hosts, syndicated carriers, or anyone associated with this broadcast. Any rebroadcast, reproduction, or other use of this broadcast or podcast without the express written consent of Spaced Out Radio or Spaced Out Radio Limited is strictly prohibited. Listener discretion is advised.
BUMBLEFOOT. BUMBLEFOOT.
Are you experienced?
Stop right there!
From high atop the mountains of British Columbia to you, listening around the world, this is Spaced Out Radio with host Dave Scott.
They let us play with all our toys. They let us think that we're big boys. They let us make a lot of noise, but we ain't rule the world. They let us think we're Superman.
You can follow us on our website, spacedoutradio.com, on iTunes and TuneIn. Follow Dave on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio, on Facebook at Spaced Out Radio Show, or on our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio Show.
I try to act so cool, but you know I'm just a fool for you. For you. I will stop till I reach the top just to be there with you. With you.
Dave, oh Dave, are you playing with Bigfoot and aliens again?
Dad, you gotta stop haunting the ghosts. It's scaring them.
All right, seriously, put down the pointy sticks.
Oh, the deeper I fall.
Okay! Game on! Game on! Game on!
The password is...
All right.
Buckle up, space travelers. It's time to go for a ride on Spaced Out Radio. Mr. Bumblefoot, Dave is ready for liftoff.
I try to act so cool, but you know I'm just a fool for you. For you.
Seriously, Dave? Really? Aren't you a little old for a tinfoil hat?
Hello, Toby. Bye-bye. Love you. Bye-bye.
Please take your seat above us. We will be able to prepare for pickup. Start. 2, 1. Boost ignition and liftoff.
I'm such a lucky guy, 'cause after all this time, it's like the deeper I go, the deeper I fall. The deeper I go, the deeper I fall.
Good evening and welcome to Spaced Out Radio tonight. I am your host, Dave Scott. It's great to have you along for the ride on this Tuesday, August 21st, Wednesday, August 22nd. If you're on the East Coast or across the pond, hope you had a great day and night as we are live right here in the Great White North on top of the mountains of central British Columbia as we are here 7 days a week. We welcome in everyone listening in on WQEE 99 Rock the Key down in Noonan, Georgia, home of The Walking Dead. We are live as well on the United Public Radio Network, 107.9 FM in New Orleans and over 160 countries around the world. We're also live at spacedoutradio.com, Spreaker, KTLK, The Fringe FM, Renegade Talk Radio out of Las Vegas, the High Plains Talk Radio Network, and if you're listening in on Revolution Radio, remember the Double R Machine is a donation station financed by you, the valued listeners. Head on over to freedomslips.com and donate today. You can follow us all over social media on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio. Give our Facebook page a like, Spaced Out Radio Show. On Instagram, you can follow me at Dave Scott, SOR. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio Show. You can listen to us on iHeartRadio in the United States. Tune in, download, and subscribe to our shows on iTunes. And our website is spacedoutradio.com. Now, when you go to our website, all you have to do is check things out. For $5 a month, you can become an SOR space traveler, and you can also shop at our Spaced Out Radio store. Pick yourself up a t-shirt, posters, stickers. Rock out to our resident guitar god, Mr. Ron Bumblefoot THAL, formerly of Guns N' Roses, currently of Art of Anarchy. Yes, Bumblefoot is the official music of Spaced Out Radio. You can read up on all our news sections in the Encounter, courtesy of our editors, Eric Markham and Everett Thiemer. Check out my latest blog there as well. If you've had a sighting you can't explain, fill out an SOR Sightlines report, and check out some great video viewing from Contact TV's Leslie Mitchell-Clark and UFO Seekers Tim Doyle. Now, if you want to take part in this show, you got to do me a favor. You have to sign into one of the chat rooms. Either go on Revolution Radio, you can go on Spreaker, you can go on Facebook at the SOR Space Travelers Club, or be one of the lucky ones on Twitter at hashtag Spaced Out Radio who connects with me live during the show. Actually, I'm in every room, so I guess it really doesn't matter. Just connect in. That way we can all hang out and have some fun. Every second month on this show, we are joined by one of the top cryptid and paranormal researchers on this planet. And yes, it's round, not flat. In David Weatherly. Whether it's Sasquatch on the ground, serpents in the sea, or Mothman or pterodactyls in the sky, David is the premier voice to discuss the research as to what people are seeing and experiencing. It's not a question if these stories are happening, but where, and more importantly, how, especially if these creatures are not supposed to exist. In hours 2 and 3, we will be joined by Seattle paranormal researcher Ross Allison, who has penned a book with David called Haunted Toys. Ross has been a guest on this show talking all things strange and eerie around the Emerald City, and tonight we'll combine forces, as we normally do, to see what the heck is going on in the realm of ghosts as well. David Weatherly, my friend, compadre, how are you?
What's up, brother? It's always good to be on.
You know what? It's always good to have you. And I got to admit, man, I get a little bit excited when you're about to come on because I think, you know, there are a lot of guests that we have on a basis. And I just keep thinking, you know what? Don't screw up and don't look stupid. But when you come on, man, when you come on, I could honestly say that pressure is on. It is on because literally... You know, whether you like to admit it or not, I'm going to blow some sunshine up your ass and tell you you're one of the best out there, man. And, you know, I got to make sure I take care of you.
Well, thanks, man. That means a lot coming from you. It's, I try to stay humble, but it's cool to hear it every once in a while. I'm human just like everybody else. So, you know, I put a lot of time and effort into this stuff. So it's good to know that somebody appreciates it.
Well, you know what? You're very appreciated around here, Dave. And I do owe you an apology because you and Ross were going to come up here at the end of next month for our first annual Caribou Paracon. But unfortunately, due to all the forest fires up here that have burned through and literally are still burning about 30 miles south of me, I had to cancel the event. I just could not, you know, for the life of me, and I grinded my teeth, and I know I took a lot of heat from people up here, but I just couldn't see going to door to people's stores, asking them to help advertise and put this show on the map when everybody is just so hurting up here due to the forest fires, man. So unfortunately, I had to shut it down.
Completely understandable. Yeah, completely understandable. I mean, my first concern was making sure that you were okay. I got a couple of other friends up there in the region, and it's really tragic to see that unfolding up there and just watching all the posts and everything, and like I said, being concerned about everything, really. The certainly the people and the land and everything else up there. And it's a real tragedy. It's sad to hear that they're still going up there. But I'm glad you guys are all safe. And hey, we were all ready to come up and creep you guys out. And
I know.
As long as the dates work out okay, we'll be there next year.
Well, you know what? You are definitely going to be one of the first on my list, both you and Ross, because I think adding people such as yourself only shows the credibility that we can bring to this event when we finally kick it off. I'm not saying we're not going to do it, but we're definitely going to delay it probably into 2018, September 2018, because we do want to coincide with another Paracon, Eric Cooper from Forest Moon Paranormal down in Washington State, whose is September 23rd. So, it's one of those things where you have to just make sure that you get everything crossed. But I'll tell you, people here are scared. We're jumpy. And I will say this, I haven't even told everybody else this. It's the little things, David, that you miss. It's easy to get back in your house and get settled in, but you live on the edge. I still have suitcases packed in my room. I don't have any of my clothes hanging up because just in case this thing flares up again, and I don't think it will because our temperatures are starting to drop, which is, for a lot of people, they get upset about that, but man, I am happy about that. Our temperatures are starting to drop,
no
especially at night, and, but I just don't feel comfortable unloading the suitcases yet, just in case all of a sudden that phone rings or you hear the knock on your door saying you have a time limit to get out. Because literally my area, Dave, I found this out about a week after we were allowed back in the house, that the flames were so hot in the fire that was burning right on our doorstep that claimed 2 houses, that they were the hottest recorded in British Columbia history. So much so that the firefighters were literally dousing the flames with water, and the flames were like laughing at the water and were not going out. And literally I learned so much about this. Above the fire, where the fire crews are fighting this, there is a helicopter with a professional, I don't even know what the position is, but his job is to basically map out or plan what a fire is going to do. And literally, they were within 15 to 30 minutes of calling a full evacuation of the 108-mile area where I live, and they were going to let it all burn. And then they were going to, and that's, last I read, that's 700 houses. Okay, 700 houses they were going to sacrifice, and then what they were going to do is they were going to build the barriers along the highway that separates us from the forest on the other side and the mountains on the other side, and that's what they were going to use as a barrier. But they were ready to sacrifice our area, and just as they were debating whether or not to make that decision, it was like the hand of God came down. And I call it a miracle, and the firefighters I talked to call it a miracle as well, because this thing was starting to rage, and all of a sudden this hand of God came down, and it was like he said he turned the wind that was blowing at about 25, 30 miles an hour. He turned the wind a direct 180 and pushed the flames back into themselves. Saved our entire area, man. That's, but I mean, I know I kind of went elongated there, but it's the little things that you can't do right now, Dave. You can't mow your lawn.
Oh, sure.
You can't mow your lawn. You can't chop wood, because what happens if you accidentally hit a rock and it sparks something?
Right.
So it's the little things that you can't do right now that are frustrating, because normally at this time, I'm out getting firewood. And prepping for winter. I need about 10 cords of firewood because my wife's a burnaholic, right? in our wood burning stove, but it's cheaper than the electricity, right? So it is scary, man. It is scary.
Man, yeah, that's intense. But like I said, I'm glad you got through it safe and sound, and I'm sure there's a certain level of trauma that goes with that, and. Unless you've experienced that, you can't really understand that. But,
no.
Wow.
The scary part about it is, Dave, and I know my audience has heard this, but you and I really haven't had a chance to talk. The scary part about it is what happens next year. Because with all of these fires that are going on right now, what we don't know, or what most people don't realize, is those fires are actually burning about a foot to 2 feet underground in the root system. And and when we'll get about 3, 4, 5 feet of snow this winter, and all that snow is going to do is insulate that burning. So when it comes through the ground next year, if it does, now we're in danger again.
Man.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, you guys have been pretty dry up there, right, for a while.
Yeah. Yeah, I think.
Because I know, we can ask Ross when he comes on, but he and I were out in the field just a couple of weeks ago, and he was telling me that Seattle has had some crazy amount of days without rain. So it's just. In fact, I think it might have been a record for how many days in a row without rain in Seattle. And everybody thinks, Seattle it rains every day, but
exactly.
But yeah, they've had a long dry spell up there. So those kind of unusual weather patterns that really screws with things.
Absolutely, and I can tell you right now, in the last 2-3 months, I can say it's maybe rained a total of about 30 hours.
Wow. Yeah.
You just don't get you don't get things done, man. And it is dry, man. It is desert dry up here right now. Desert dry.
Right.
So we're all good. You know what? Let's focus on some positive stuff here, because it is positive. We're back home, and we're going to get the Paracon going next year, which you're going to come up to, which is going to be amazing. What have you been working on lately since we last talked?
Oh boy, let's see. You know me, I've always got a dozen irons in the fire, so to speak. And Ross and I were out a couple of weeks ago for a documentary project we're working on. We can talk about that more when he gets back in. I've got a revised edition. I haven't announced this anywhere yet. This is just for you, Dave.
Well,
I haven't told anybody this yet, but there is a revised edition of The Black-Eyed Children coming out. The book is 5 years ago that it came out this year, and it also marks 20 years since Brian Bethel had his encounter, which is hands down the most well-known encounter with these things. And actually, Brian went into seclusion for a long time after he encountered these things, and wouldn't really talk about it. But I've been in communication with Brian, and there's a piece of from him in this book that's kind of a dialogue I had with him, and it's reflecting back on 20 years later, essentially, of this iconic encounter with these black-eyed kids. And you've heard this story. You do know the story, right?
Yeah.
Brian Bethel encounter.
You know what? If you could, Dave, I would appreciate it, because every time you're on, we have new listeners building up. So if you could actually share
absolutely.
that again, that would be wonderful.
So, 1997, a journalist named Brian Bethel, living in Abilene, Texas, goes out one evening to write a check to slip into a drop box for a bill. And he drives down to a strip center. He's sitting in his car. He's writing out a check. And suddenly there are these two boys that approach his vehicle, and on the driver's side. And Brian said that initially he just had an odd feeling. He wasn't in a bad part of town or anything, but something just didn't vibe right for him. So he only put the window down partway, and enough so he could hear these kids. And they started this dialogue with him. And the kid says, "Hey, mister, we want to see a movie, and we forgot our money. So we want to know if will you take us home to our mother so we can get our money?" Now, Bethel had the presence of mind to glance over at the movie marquee and realize that the last showing of the movie was already like halfway over or something. So immediately things aren't quite adding up. And as he shows resistance to complying, essentially, with letting these kids in his car, they get a little bit more pushy. Now, one is standing closer to the car, the other one is a couple feet behind him. And they're wearing, very bland clothing. They're wearing hoodies. They sort of had their, they're early teens and, sort of have that innocuous, just trying to present this everyday normal teenager appearance. But Brian said that something was just wrong the whole time. And the more these kids talked, or the main kid talked, the more unsettled Bethel became. And this kid started to be a little bit insistent and said things like, "Come on, mister, we're just a couple of kids. Let us in your car." Now, Bethel finally makes eye contact with these kids, and he realizes that they have solid black eyes. Now, we're not talking just the pupil. We're talking the entire square. No whites in the eyes, no color, no nothing. Just these, solid black eyes. And that was enough. That kind of put him over the edge. He threw the car into gear. He pulled out of the parking space, turned around, looked in his rearview mirror, Dave, and these kids were gone. So he wasted no time getting out of there and getting far from this shopping center. He tries to figure out exactly what's going on here. This is early days of the internet, so there were different message boards and things like that at the time. He goes and writes his account out because he was a writer. He was a journalist. That's what he did. When he had something he was trying to comprehend or understand, he'd write about it. So he wrote this encounter out and he posted it on a message board. And essentially he wrote, asking for opinions, asking people what do you think this was? What did I encounter? Has anybody else seen anything like this? And what ensued was just amazing because, for one thing, he had tons of people contact him all of a sudden and asking questions and wanting to hear the encounter personally and just, the same questions, sending them same questions over and over via email and every other way they could get a hold of. There was also a flurry of people who posted their own accounts saying that they had encountered these things. Now, in the midst of all of this, it was Bethel himself that coined the phrase BEK, which is an acronym for Black Eyed Kid. And something interesting that Brian told me some time back was that he really wishes that he had never used that acronym and come up with that phrase. He said because to him it now feels limited in terms of what he encountered. And, of course, there are accounts on record of black-eyed adults as well as children. Not as many. There are a lot more with kids, but still, Brian feels like it somehow limited things in terms of how people come to understand whatever this is and encountered. But it's really fascinating because, we're seeing, as I've stated before, really the beginning of a modern wave of these sightings. And there have been plenty of accounts that predate Brian. It just so happens that he was fortunate or unfortunate, just depending on your view, I guess, to be the first one, in the computer age to post one of these accounts and say, this is what happened to me. It got so intense for Brian that he really went into seclusion. He refused to answer questions about the black-eyed kids. He kind of withdrew from social media, and he just sort of vanished for a while. And it was unfortunate because when I actually researched the book, of course, I tried to get in touch with Bethel, and he wouldn't respond to any messages or anything. I'm sure he had gotten a million messages like that of people interested in writing about the story. But I really wanted to talk to him firsthand when I wrote the book, since his encounter was so significant, and get his input. But couldn't reach him. So I went with the standard encounter that had been repeated so many times online, and talked about it a little bit in the first edition of the book, and kind of went about my business. And I found out much later that, of course, Brian had somewhere along the way started coming back out, and of course he he bought my book at some point and read it. And, I got a very nice email from him at some point saying that, he really enjoyed the book and thought I did an excellent job of talking about and expanding on the different theories and so forth to explain what these kids were or are, rather. So it's interesting. He has slowly come out a little bit more and more here and there. And, he's a bit more open in terms of talking about it now. He still really doesn't know exactly what it was he encountered. And still has a lot of questions, as does anyone who's encountered these things. But hands down, it's like I said, it's a pretty significant account in modern terms, and it's great to have him come back out. And I'm really happy that he has contributed, something to the new edition of the book. It's basically a re-edited version of the original book. I just kind of refined it a little bit, and there's a little bit of extra material in there. There's a new cover by artist Sam Sharon, who's done a lot of my other work, and it's amazing. The cover will really creep you out. And if folks want to pay attention over the next couple of weeks, I'll probably be teasing that cover on my blog and Facebook and so forth.
David, a lot of people have had this experience with the black-eyed kids. However, many out there, including myself, have a tough time believing that there are black-eyed children running around asking for this to happen. I mean, we got more chance of a lottery win happening than running into these. I mean, the stories are so far and few between. How do we know what is causing, or what have you learned about what is causing these encounters with BEKs?
Well, first of all, there's a lot more encounters than you realize, because this is a topic that really, there's a lot of people who have these encounters and they won't report it. They don't want to talk about it. I can tell you, David, some of the more impressive and sort of stunning encounters that I've heard were from people who absolutely would not let me publish the encounter. They wanted to talk to me. They wanted my opinion on what they had encountered. They were willing to share details and so forth, but under no circumstances would they allow this to be, even using pseudonyms. They didn't want me to tell the story. And it's a combination of things. It's because, people who experience these things, they come away traumatized. And the level of fear that is created during these encounters is off the charts. If we sort of look at a, quote, standard encounter with the black-eyed children, there's a couple of stages, about 3 stages that people go through. And the first stage is this uneasiness that rapidly develops into a confused, nervous state where the brain is trying to comprehend and trying to reconcile how to deal with the situation. Because, as an adult, you're programmed, I think you're hardwired to help a kid. If a kid comes up to you and says, hey, mister, I need, a drink of water, or I need to find my mother, or I need to make a phone call, your natural reaction is going to be to help this kid. Whether you have kids of your own or not. It's just I think it's part of our nature as adults. The bulk of the adults that are out there. Now, the thing is what happens when you default to that kind of response, but all of your body's signals are saying something's wrong, get away. It really creates this strange conflict, this push-pull. And I've had so many people talk to me about how confused they are at this stage because they're thinking, oh, this kid says he needs to come in and make a phone call, but, the hair on the back of my neck is up and I'm, my stomach's queasy, whatever their individual signs are that something's wrong. So they have this whole battle with trying to figure out how to reconcile that. And then what inevitably happens is that they make eye contact with these kids and realize that they don't quite look human. There's something off. There's something wrong. And the flight response kicks in. And these people run away. I've heard this time and time again, and there are hundreds and hundreds of accounts out there. There are actually a lot of accounts that predate the internet and even television. And that was one of the things, when I first researched the topic, I was interested to see if I could prove that it was not simply an urban legend or a modern phenomena or something that was very isolated. And I quickly learned that the way to do that was by removing that acronym and removing that catchphrase, black-eyed kid or black-eyed child. Because when you take that away and you look at the basic components of these encounters, then you realize that there are a lot of these throughout history. It's just that you have to understand it through the cultural lens and the lens of a time period with the people who had the encounters. For instance, I found one from the 1950s. It happened in a rural area of Virginia. And, simple kind of farming folk. Well, their way to explain this encounter was that the person had met the devil. Because the term BEK didn't exist. They didn't say, nowhere in the story does it say black-eyed kid or black-eyed child or anything like that. The rest of the factors are certainly present. It's just that given their, community, given the way they live, how could they identify this weird encounter? Well, it's got to be the devil. So when you go back and search in other places for those parameters, then that's when a lot of stories start to come to light.
Do you feel a lot of people with the BEKs are just so fearful of what they saw that they refuse to come forward? Like, out of 10, how many stories do you think you're getting, is what I'm asking.
Oh, how many am I getting? Geez. I don't know. I can say that, I bet you out of every 10 people who contact me and tell me their account, there's at least 50 who refuse to. But I know for a fact that, I get emails about these things every week, obviously because I wrote the book about it. However, I can tell you there's a half dozen other researchers that I know personally who get an equal number of accounts of these things, and they're all different because we've compared notes before, and there's another person who's a radio host who's talked about the topic quite a bit, and he gets tons of these accounts, and he'll sometimes shoot them over to me and he'll say, "Have you heard this one? Did this person contact you?" And I'm like, "Nope, this is a new one on me." And there's a few other researchers who are really interested in the topic and have sort of put the call out over the last few years that they're looking for these encounters, and they get them all the time. And again, it's different accounts than what I hear. So I'd say there's probably I know there's hundreds and hundreds of these things that I haven't heard at this point. I was in Australia last year for a conference. They flew me over to speak, and I heard a bunch of encounters over there, that of course I'd never heard here. And I have some Australian accounts from people that have emailed me. But, when I was over there and out speaking about it, I had all these other people approach me and say, "Oh my gosh, what you're talking about? I've seen one of these things." So it's something that I think we're going to continue to hear more and more about. And it's also, it's a fascinating phenomenon in that when you really look at the encounters, I can tell you, Dave, one of the things that really compelled me about it when I first started researching it is that you can make an argument that these things are some kind of alien hybrid. You can make an argument that there's something demonic. You can make an argument that they're, somehow related to the infamous Men in Black. It's really bizarre because they share traits with a whole range of other types of phenomena. And that in itself is something that I am very fascinated by. Why are there all these similar components? One or two maybe would be okay. I could understand that, but man, it's not. It's more than that. I mean, there's ghost stories about black-eyed ghosts, and there's some of these BEK encounters where the people, they see these kids and they swear that they're physical beings, but then there'll be some kind of component that is almost like a spirit, like where, well, I don't remember seeing the feet. You know, I don't remember seeing any feet on these two kids. But everything else, it sounds like a black-eyed kid encounter. So it's one of the most fascinating aspects, I think, of the phenomenon.
Do you think that we will ever be able to figure out what is actually causing this phenomena, or do you think the mystery continues much like everything else in this supernatural field?
I think the mystery will continue. And the reason I think that is because, this is my personal opinion, but, you know, in terms of the BK, I think that there is, we're really going to get out there a little bit, Dave. I think there is I'm trying to think exactly how to phrase this. There's a different level of consciousness that is, it's almost as if it's directing this stuff. And when I say this stuff, I mean a lot of phenomena in general. You know, John Keel was a big influence on me. I met him early on when I was doing this stuff, and of course his material, you know, for the time I thought was very cutting edge. You know, growing up in the 70s and 80s and studying this stuff, Keel was the guy who would talk about all these different types of phenomena and had no problem talking about ghosts one minute and you know, Mothman the next and MIBs the next. And over the years being in this field, I've seen a lot of division created where people say, oh, well, you know what, I only specialize in Bigfoot. You know, if you're talking about flying saucers, you know, put your tinfoil hat on and go over there and talk to those people, you know, and vice versa. So you see all this division, and I think that's a real crime. You know, I don't begrudge anyone who wants to specialize and study one particular topic. However, don't pitch everything else out and say that it's not relevant, especially when there are cases where this stuff intermingles. Keel was really big on that. Keel was one of those people that said, you know, look, there's something else behind all of this, you know, whether it's some higher level of consciousness, whether it's the freaking archetypal trickster, you know, who knows what it is. But, you know, we have to consider all these things collectively. And I've always adhered to that, partially from his influence, from the influence of people like Jacques Vallée and others. That's always been kind of my route. And I know for a fact, you know, from some of my experiences, I think that's what's going on, because I've got a really weird incident that happened that sort of interconnected a bunch of phenomena, and it deals with the black-eyed kids. Now it's a little bit long, so I don't know if we're coming up on a break.
We got time, my friend.
To go into that.
We got time. We got about 19 minutes here.
Okay, so you'll love this one. The book came out. The Black-eyed Children book came out in 2012, and a couple of things happened. One is that I referenced the Men in Black earlier. Now, one of the things that the Men in Black are infamous for is causing electronic interference. Okay, so there have been a couple of things related to that when I was researching the book. But after the book came out, within probably a month of it being out, this woman contacted me. She said that she had the book. She was really enjoying it, but she had a couple of questions. And she said, I was reading your book, and the first time I started reading it, you know, what was it? Something electronic. Oh, man, I just had a blank. Something electronic went off in her house. And she kind of discounted it, so that's odd, but, you know, whatever. So the next time she sat down to read the book, the alarm on her stove went off. Now, at this point, she was really puzzled because she said, I've never used that timer. She said, I didn't even know what it was at first, and I kind of followed the sound and found that the timer on the oven was going off. There was nothing in the oven, nobody else in the house. She said, I don't understand it. So she still kind of set it aside and thought, well, this is kind of curious, but the third time she sat down to read the book, she said that as she was sitting there reading, and she heard this noise, and her garage door was opening itself. Now, at this point, she was really kind of flipping out. She said she put the book away. She wouldn't touch it again, and she wanted to know, you know, if there was electronic in it. She wasn't even at the point about the MIBs in the book. She said, I want to know if there's electronic interference associated with these kids, and if this is some kind of a sign that they're going to come back. So because I want to read about it, but I don't want to encounter them. So it was kind of interesting to hear that story from her, and what came on the heels of it. Because what came on the heels of it was that I had sent a copy of the book to a friend of mine who lives in Kentucky. Now, he's a paranormal researcher. He's been doing it for quite a few years. I live cross country. I live in the desert in the Southwest. And my buddy, he got the book and thanked me for it or whatever. Well, a couple of weeks or something passed, and one day I got a call from him on my cell phone. So I answered the call, and there's just like this weird, beeping and electronic noise. Now, I thought, okay, well, he pocket dialed me or whatever, so I hung up, set it aside. Well, Dave, this started happening over and over again. I would literally be sitting at my desk working on something. I'd walk away, I'd come back, there'd be a missed call. And it was it, it was his number. And I'm thinking, this is getting kind of crazy. Well, then it got crazier because I'd start getting, calls at like 3 or 4 in the morning, missed logs on my phone from him.
Okay.
So, and there are messages being left, right? But I'm listening to the message, and there's nothing but background noise. Now, oddly enough, I'm still not connecting this yet. What happens is I get, trying to be rational and trying to, stay on point as you do with these things. I sit down and I listen to one of the messages one day, and it's long, it's just long. And a lot of it's just background noise. And then I hear this kid. I hear this kid laughing. And I'm thinking, I'm not jumping to the conclusion black-eyed kids. I'm thinking, oh, he's got a kid, his kid's playing with his phone. So, I sent him a message. I'm like, dude, your kid has been playing with your phone and keeps dialing my number. A time or two is one thing, but this is happening constantly. Oh man, he was so apologetic. He was like, oh yeah, I guess he's doing that. I'm really sorry. So, he's looking at the phone and he's thinking, oh God, it's always missed logs. Yeah, I'm really sorry. I won't, it won't happen again. I'm going to put my phone up. Well, it does happen again. And it keeps happening for, the next few days. Well, I'm sitting at my desk one day. I was sitting there working on a book, and my phone lights up and it rings, and this is at night. I'm sitting there, and then a message. I was online, so a message pops up from him. So it's really him this time, and he's like, "Oh my God, dude, you gotta call me. And you won't believe what happened." So I talked to him, and he was flipping out. He's like, man, I was laying on my bed. I had the Black-Eyed Children in my hands. I was reading it. My phone was sitting in the middle of the bed. I swear nobody was touching it. It lit up and dialed your number. And I'm like, what? And he's like, yeah, I'm serious. I'm completely serious. And he's like, I'm taking it to the cell phone company tomorrow. Well, now this is intriguing, right? I was like, okay, it's not his kid doing this. It's something else is going on. He takes the phone to a cell phone provider. He says, I want you guys to figure this out because my phone keeps dialing this one number over and over. They had his phone, Tex had his phone forever, for hours trying to figure it out. They finally bring it back to him and they said, well, there's nothing wrong with the phone. We can't understand why it's doing it. We don't know what to tell you. We can't fix it. So this continues to happen, another week or two goes by. It still happens sporadically. And then my buddy, his name is Jeff. Jeff goes on a road trip. He's going to hit several haunted locations. He's got his cell phone on the dash of his car. It lights up and dials my number for the final time at the moment that he crosses the bridge into Point Pleasant, West Virginia.
No way. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Tell me the Mothman at least left him voicemail or something.
Oh my God. Kind of expecting injured gold after that, But the point was too, for me personally, you could not have put on a stronger exclamation point to that whole episode than for it to happen that one last time in Point Pleasant. Because, again, this comes full circle. I mean, there's John Keel, and there's the Mothman, there's the Men in Black, there's all the weirdness of Point Pleasant, one of the strangest towns in the country. And, just this whole idea. And I sat there, and I kid you not, Dave, I just sat there for the longest time at my desk, and I'm thinking, and I just had this feeling. After the incident, I had this feeling. It was as if something was saying to me, see, we can do whatever we want to. We can manipulate things. We can make the kind of point that we want to make. It was such a trickster moment. It was such a strange, weird paranormal incident, and one of those things that just leaves you confounded.
I want to continue on with this, but I have to read on our Twitter account at #SpacedOutRadio. Sometimes these my listeners who get some really good snark going, and this one I wanted to pass with you because I know you'll find this funny. And this comes from @Andrew Burnkeen, and he says #SpacedOutRadio. If a black-eyed child comes to my door, I'll be like, "You got time to try and scare and haunt me? You got time for chores." I thought that was hilarious.
That's great.
I thought that was absolutely hilarious. So far, that is the tweet of the night. That one's going to be tough to break tonight.
That's going to be tough to break. Yeah.
That is going to be tough to break, absolutely. But, on the flip side of things, Dave, the coincidences when things happen, and we had actually something happen last night. Tim Doyle from UFOseekers.com, he comes on the third Monday of every month. We were chatting about a little bit of conspiracies about getting sources and protecting the sources, and what would happen if he actually got some big news, or how would he react if somebody came knocking at his door. And right when we were talking about that, boom, his phone goes dead. Now normally I would rack that up to anything. Bad cell phone connection, if it's on Skype, that maybe there was a Skype problem, so on and so forth. But there was no problem on my end. We were still connected. His phone died on his end. And, I try not to be a tinfoil hat wearing guy when that happens. But sometimes, Dave, it just makes you wonder if it's really true. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So when you experience something like that, where all of a sudden your phone number is being dialed as he's getting into Point Pleasant, I believe there is some sort of coincidence with that, man. I totally believe that.
Yeah, I prefer the term synchronicity, and I don't really, I'm one of those people that doesn't ignore those things. I think there's a certain degree of coincidences that can happen, but then you have really strange things that you have to question and think, what? Why did that set of circumstances? Why did that unfold like that? It's a little bit too bizarre sometimes to just ignore. And a lot of times, if you really watch those synchronicities, I think they often point to things.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, and I would agree with that too. Do you notice a lot more synchronistic things happening, Dave, the more you have gotten into this field?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Now,
that absolutely happens.
So how would you define then, when it comes to the cryptids and the paranormal, how would you define synchronistic compared to just sheer coincidence?
I think synchronicity creates a pattern, whereas coincidence is random. So, you can have a few random coincidences that maybe create a strange set of circumstances. But, when synchronicities start and they just kind of fall like dominoes and they lead in the same direction, then I think it's time to question what's going on at a higher level here. Does that make sense?
I think so too. Do you think it's maybe that because you're on alert for strange things to happen, that maybe you just notice more?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because, I think that, my background, Dave, is spiritually is shamanism. And I study with a lot of teachers from different cultures. And, one of the things that all of these guys consistently pushed on me was increasing your level of awareness and being more in tune with the natural world. And I think when you do that, you certainly do notice more things and become more in tune with both the natural and, in my case, the unnatural world, because that's what I'm sort of focused on and in tune to watch out for. And it's a bit different, for me, and nothing against the weekend people, but when you got somebody that only goes out and does a ghost hunt on the weekends or something, they're living in a very different mindset because they're doing a 9-to-5 job all week. Whereas, this is what occupies me, really, about 24/7. So, this is what I do all the time. And I think as a result, then yeah, I feel like I probably am prone to, notice more of those things. And there's certainly, and there's a lot of other researchers in the field that are in that same state. I talk to people who have that same mindset about it, that they notice more of these synchronicities, that they notice, they try to be more in tune, and because of that, they tend to experience more things and find more things.
We only got about 4.5 minutes here before we need to go to break. I want to get to Michael's question here, Dave. And he is saying, David, do you know of anyone who has reported being harmed by black-eyed children?
Indirectly. There's not any, there aren't any reports that I've investigated personally where someone was, for instance, attacked, physically attacked by these kids. I haven't seen any incidents where they forced themselves into a home or a car or anything else like that. There are some pretty sensational stories on the internet. Unfortunately, those usually you're not able to pursue those and even interview the people personally. But there are a few accounts in my book where people had bad experiences as a result of dealing with the kids. One of the strangest was a woman who was, made physical contact with one of the kids. And she had a whole series of very strange things happen to her. And I've talked to a couple of people, actually, who have either, more often they reach out to touch one of the kids. There was a woman I spoke with who, she encountered a black-eyed girl, and she reached out and touched this little girl on the arm because she thought, she was trying to comfort her. She thought the girl was in trouble or something like that. She reached out and touched her and reported that the child was just, stone cold. It was just completely ice cold, and the flesh felt odd. And after that, this woman became very ill for a time. So there are things like that seem to occur. The implication is that the closer proximity someone is to these children, the more dire the results.
Do you see an increase in violence or activity towards people who are getting more involved with black-eyed kids?
You dropped out for a minute. Who are getting more what?
More involved with black-eyed kids, investigating it more? Are you seeing more violence?
No, not in general, I don't think. No, it's a tough thing to investigate, really. It's kind of, it's frustrating to a point in that you can't really, where do you go to quote, hopefully have a sighting if that's what you're interested in. It's not like it's an isolated area or something. If you want to see, the Mothman, then, you'd spend a lot of time in Point Pleasant. If you wanted to see a UFO, you'd go to, known hotspots and hopefully have an encounter. But these kids, the way they pop up is just completely random. And, what's really strange about it too is that there are not really repeat encounters. Pretty much everyone I've spoken to, for the most part, they've only seen these kids one time. And, that's more than enough as far as they're concerned. but the encounter occurs, and that's kind of it. Nothing. The kids don't return or anything else. So, most of the encounters you see, maybe Bob in Cleveland will run into a pair of these kids, but you won't hear anything reported from Cleveland for a year or two before somebody says something. So it's really it's part of the overall puzzle, and it's also, as I said, maybe a little bit frustrating for some people who really want to research it. We're kind of regulated to trying to understand it through the aftermath of the encounters and the sightings at this point, and interviewing witnesses and gathering whatever we can, and of course, correlating that with past evidence.
Mm-hmm. And we're going to get you to hold on here because we are going to go out to our first break of the hour. David Weatherly is our guest. We've been talking black-eyed kids, a little bit of forest fire action. We're going to get into a lot more, maybe a little Bigfoot. But we're also going to bring in Ross Allison, David's writing partner on Haunted Toys. He's going to get all paranormal with us for hours 2 and 3. So it's going to be a lot of fun indeed coming up. You're listening to Spaced Out Radio. I am your host, Dave Scott. We'll be back right after this break.
365 days a year, we're in the field, investigating UFO sightings, talking to alien abductees, and visiting secret military locations like Area 51. We're UFO Seekers, official partner of Spaced Out Radio. Follow our daily search for the truth at ufoseekers.com or like us on social media. Catch us on Spaced Out Radio every third Monday of the month as we discuss Area 51, UFOs, and more. And also, don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube.
From coast to coast to coast, Blacklight Uncharted is taking on the paranormal across Canada. From ghostly hauntings to the UFOs flying above in conjunction with MUFON Canada, they're closely investigating what's going on in the northern skies and checking out the apparitions that walk among us. Check out our videos right here at spacedoutradio.com. We want to know your thoughts, we want to hear your experiences, and we want you to share your stories. The answers are out there, and we intend to find them.
Would you like to become one of our space travelers? All you have to do is click on the Space Travelers icon at spacedoutradio.com. For only $5 a month, you can get access to some great prizes, as well as private monthly shows, newsletters, and a members-only section on our website. Become a space traveler today.
It's paranormal news at its finest. Welcome to The Encounter. At spacedoutradio.com, The Encounter online is SOR's trusted news source for everything weird and strange going on around the world. This is news editor Eric Markham. Our team of journalists are scouring the planet for those strange stories that rarely make the mainstream. No fear-mongering or fake news here. Head over to spacedoutradio.com and encounter The Encounter.
Want to learn more about aliens, cover-ups, conspiracies, cryptids, and the paranormal? All you have to do is tune in S4 as we take over Spaced Out Radio Night, starting at midnight Pacific, 3 a.m. Eastern, each and every Saturday night, right after Spaced Out Saturdays. Hi there, this is Eric Cooper from Forest Moon Paranormal. Join me, Corey Ruiz, and friends as we discuss the hot topics of the night. It's fun, entertaining, and as dark as the night. Find us at spacedoutradio.com.
Hey, this is Canadian Paranormal Investigator Mike Moore. The third Wednesday of every month, I'll be teaming up with Dave Scott to bring you Ghosts of the Great White North. Each month, we will bring on guests from across Canada to discuss their ghostly encounters. Canada is a paranormal hotbed with stories you've never heard, so we're going to bring them to you. So get comfy on your Chesterfield, grab a donut, and join us, eh?
Are you an experiencer? Have you had run-ins with strange creatures you can't explain? ETs, Dogman, Bigfoot, werewolves? They're enough to scare the daylights out of anyone. Hi there, I'm Butch Witkowski from your 4-Cop. And on the last Monday of every month, you can listen to me and the host, Dave Scott, talk about the weird and the strange being reported on Spaced Out Radio. I'm going to bring my investigations and sources, you bring your experiences, and we'll figure out the rest together. Strange Days on Spaced Out Radio. Come tune us in at spacedoutradio.com.
Want a place to share your experiences without feeling judged? We have the place for you. If you've experienced sightings or contact with ETs, ghosts, cryptids, or UFOs, and you'd like someone to confidentially look into the matter, Just fill out an SOR Sightlines report. Our goal is to help you get the answers you need to the experiences you've had with our professional team of researchers. Your information stays 100% confidential. The SOR Sightlines report. Fill out your experience today only at spacedoutradio.com.
Psychic Sundays, spiritual communication, ET contact, Sasquatch in your backyard. We will have it all on Cosmic Passport with me, Elizabeth Anglin. Each Sunday, starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern, at spacedoutradio.com, I will take you on a journey of enlightenment. The goal is learning from the soul on out. We'd love it if you joined our experience. Cosmic Passport, heard Sundays at spacedoutradio.com.
Are you interested in advertising on Spaced Out Radio? Head to our website at spacedoutradio.com and click on our advertising tab. There, you will find an assortment of ways you can get your product out there with us, from radio commercials to banners and social media. Have a product you like our hosts to endorse? We can do that too. Visit spacedoutradio.com for more details.
From British Columbia to Northern California, Pacific North Weird has Cascadia covered. Check out our feature videos at spacedoutradio.com, where I, Vincent Zunza, and my super sleuth partner Alexandra Sullivan track down the weird and strange stories from around the Pacific Northwest, from Bigfoot to Mel's Hole and everything in between. This is what makes life exciting. So why report the normal when we can report the Pacific North Weird right here at spacedoutradio.com.
Don't have time to listen to Spaced Out Radio live? Wherever you are, the car, the office, the shower, or even if you're traveling, we're right here for you. Each Spaced Out Radio show can be found on iTunes, TuneIn, and on our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio Show. It's the perfect way for you to catch up on our shows. For more information, just head over to our website, spacedoutradio.com, and tune in to us today.
Welcome to Spaced Out Saturdays with me, Dave Cruz from Beyond the Strange. Our weekly feature on spacedoutradio.com will take you around the world discussing everything from the paranormal to the latest conspiracies from the top guests in their fields. We won't leave any story uncovered. Spaced Out Saturdays at spacedoutradio.com starting 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern.
The views and opinions expressed by tonight's guest and topic of discussion do not necessarily represent the official policy or position of Spaced Out Radio, Spaced Out Weekend, Spaced Out Radio Limited, its hosts, syndicated carriers, or anyone associated with this broadcast. Would you like to connect with us? Head to spacedoutradio.com for all your latest show info. And hit us up on Twitter using the hashtag SpacedOutRadio. Now, back to Dave Scott and SOR.
Welcome back to the second hour of Spaced Out Radio tonight. I am your host, Dave Scott. Good to have you with us. Tomorrow night on the program, starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern Time, psychic Salone Bella is going to join us. She's a psychic to the stars, numerologist in Hollywood, very famous down there. Was just on E! Channel talking about the eclipse just a couple of days ago. So she will be with us starting, once again, 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern Time at spacedoutradio.com. We want to welcome in everyone listening in on WQEE 99 Rock the Key down in Noonan, Georgia, home of The Walking Dead. We are live as well on the United Public Radio Network, 107.7 FM in New Orleans and over 160 countries around the world. Great to have you with us as well. We are live on KTLK, The Fringe FM, Renegade Talk Radio out of Las Vegas. And if you're listening in on Revolution Radio, remember the Double R Machine is a donation station financed by you, the valued listener. Head on over to freedomslips.com and donate today. Bill Cardwell has set the password for tonight in the SOR Space Travelers Club. ePalpabrate. ePalpabrate is your password. Make sure you use it wisely, Space Travelers, as Bill sets a password each and every night right here on the mighty SOR. Now, if you want to follow us on social media, you could do so on Twitter, at Spaced Out Radio. Use the hashtag Spaced Out Radio if you want to connect with us live during the show as well. Give our Facebook page a like, Spaced Out Radio Show. On Instagram, you can follow me at Dave Scott, SOR. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio Show. Tune us in on TuneIn. Download this show and others on iTunes, so make sure you subscribe to us there. We're also on iHeartRadio in the United States, TalkStream Live. Our website is spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you, including joining the SOR Space Travelers Club for $5 a month, shop at our Spaced Out Radio store, pick yourself up a t-shirt and more, rock out to some Bumblefoot, watch UFO Seekers and Contact TV videos, and read up on the encounter online. Everything at spacedoutradio.com. Tonight, making his bi-monthly appearance, is David Weatherly, cryptid extraordinaire investigator. Great hair as well. And we're also joined by Allison out of Seattle, paranormal guru of the Emerald City. Gentlemen, welcome back.
Well, thanks for having me.
No problem. Now, Ross, I know you're not really a cryptid guy, but I do have some questions that we were talking about black-eyed kids with David right in the first hour, and I was wondering, Dave, if you don't mind, if we could get to a few of those.
Yeah, sure.
All right. This one comes from Andrew at #SpacedOutRadio on Twitter. He's saying, David, do you know of any evidence at all, blurry photo or anything to suggest that black-eyed children are real?
There are photographs out there, but the problem is, it's like a UFO photograph. How do you really examine it? With the black-eyed kid phenomena, that is something that is so easy to Photoshop and manipulate. What's really intriguing to me when it comes to video is that there are a few cases where these things have made appearances when security cameras were present. And there's weird things that happen to the security footage. Either it has a glitch where there's just a block of time gone out of it inexplicably, or the systems have gone down a couple times. There have been things like that, and that's kind of intriguing to me. I get pictures all the time. I just kind of look at them and say, well, okay, again, that's sadly something that's very easy to Photoshop. But most of the people who encounter these things, they don't even try to take a picture because the encounter itself is just too traumatic. I don't really know what kind of physical evidence you would expect to find, because these are what appear to be human children. So, no one's ever tried to dust for fingerprints or anything like that. So, beyond that, no, not really.
And this one comes from Deb at #SpaceOutRadio on Twitter. And she is asking, what are the kids wearing for clothing in instances you have investigated?
There are a couple of different versions of how these kids appear. One is a bit more modern, and people say that the kids are wearing very drab, bland clothing, usually in grays and browns, darker colors. Typically it's something like a hoodie and just jeans. But there's also a number of accounts, a fair number of accounts, where people say that the kids are wearing clothing that appears old-fashioned or out of date. A few people describe it as looking like Amish clothing, as if it's handmade. A few people say that it seems to be like old farming clothing or something like that. So there's a percentage of them, probably, a good 30%, that describe the clothing in that way.
I want to get into some Bigfoot talk here, if you don't mind, my friend, because you have a book out called Woodknocks Volume 2 that you were looking at. Now, I got to tell you, man, up here, this whole forest fire situation has absolutely screwed up my whole Bigfoot pattern here. I was getting people coming up to me telling me where things are, where they were finding footprints, so on and so forth. Then the forest fire comes in, and I literally have not yet gone out to look in the areas where we were getting some action, so to speak, to see how it is, because a lot of the backcountry right now up here is closed off. Elsewhere around North America, what has 2017 been like for Sasquatch encounters?
A lot of encounters. I think part of it is that it's become such a part of pop culture now, just like ghost hunting has, with the advent of shows like Finding Bigfoot and, even Monster Quest before that, and some of the cryptozoology-themed reality shows. More and more people have kind of jumped into the fray, and they're out there researching and looking at various wilderness areas and so forth. And there's more than ever researchers digging into areas and uncovering accounts, older accounts, as well as modern stuff. And it's pretty fascinating to me for some of these people that I've given an opportunity to write for Wood Knots, because it is a journal, and it's a journal that the idea is that other voices in cryptozoology can come in and write pieces on Sasquatch that maybe wouldn't fill a whole book, but definitely need to be heard. And this volume has some great contributions from people around the country. Chris O'Brien, who's the preeminent guy on cattle mutilations. He has done a lot of research in the San Luis Valley and regions in Colorado. So he came in with a great piece on sightings there. Dave Spinks has been on your show, and he's a West Virginia boy, and he's dug up a lot of Sasquatch cases in West Virginia that no one's ever heard. Some of them very recent. And he contributed a great piece. And in fact, he's even gotten accounts since Wood Knots came out of recent encounters. And, again, I think there's so many people out there looking and researching now that we are getting more and more reports. And what's even more important is more people are out there to follow through on some of these accounts and investigate and, look for tracks and other evidence.
Do you think it's a matter of people being more aware in the forest now, Dave, that they are seeing things, or more people believing that they might get a Sasquatch encounter that is leading to this, or do you think there's still a lot of hoaxers out there?
Oh, there's definitely a lot of hoaxers out there, sadly. In fact, there's probably more out there now because of television. And, you constantly, I've seen a lot of these stories the last couple of years of people in ghillie suits and things like that, or even just outright in Sasquatch costumes, running around, trying to scare people and things like that. And it's really sad. It's an element that we've always had to deal with when investigating, any area of the paranormal or the supernatural. Ross and I were talking about, hoaxed photographs that go way back to the Victorian period and so forth with, seances and ghost manifestations and things like that. So sadly, that is always an element that we have to deal with, and you have to be educated enough to look at the various signs. It seems to be really bad with the Sasquatch hoaxing for some reason. I don't know what it is, man. There's just for some reason it really draws out some of the yahoos that want to, throw a suit on and film a bad YouTube video and throw it up and claim they encountered Sasquatch. So yeah, that's always there. But along with that, there are always some compelling cases that come along.
Ross, I know you're a big paranormal guy in Seattle, and that's what you focus on. But does the odd Sasquatch story from the Pacific Northwest ever eke through your information?
Oh, yeah. In fact, me and David just experienced one when we were up in Northport filming for our documentary. Everybody in town was all excited about the ghost hunters, but of course, some guy decided to tell us his Bigfoot stories. So yeah, it happens.
Do you believe then that, and this is what I believe, and I'm curious, Ross, you can jump in on this as well, but it seems that the Sasquatch that patrols the Pacific Northwest, maybe he's a pothead or something, but they seem any of them above Mount St. Helens. I know. It's the weather and the dope up here for sure. But they seem more docile.
It's legal for them to come out now.
Exactly.
Yep.
So if you see a Sasquatch with a doobie hanging out of his mouth, all you got to do is play some Bob Marley and he'll come right up, right? But
wasn't that an R. Crumb drawing? I think there's an R. Crumb drawing of a Bigfoot with a doobie or something.
Would not surprise me. Would not surprise me. But the question that I'm trying to get to is, why does the Pacific Northwest Sasquatch seem to be so much more docile than what we hear from, say, the southern states around Louisiana and even into the Everglades of Florida?
Oh, well, I think that's because of environmental conditions. Let's face it, if we assume that it is a physical animal, it's an apex animal because of its size, what competition really does it have in the Pacific Northwest? Not a whole lot. In some reason, if you go to the Pacific Northwest and include, Northern California all the way up into Canada, that whole region, and even up into Alaska, you hear a lot of similarities with the reports of Sasquatch, and there's just not a lot of competition. I mean, there's bears, but there's so much dense forest that I think that it's not as difficult for them to find, food for survival. There's not a lot of competition. Now, you go down into the Everglades, and they've got a lot to contend with. For one thing, the reports from down there tend to portray them as being smaller, as being, a lot more sort of raggedy, I guess is the word I would use, because they're not scrawny. They're still large creatures, but, they refer to them as the skunk ape down there. And there's a lot to compete with. You've got gators when you get down into the bayous and into the Everglades. You've got invasive snake species like constrictors and anacondas and things like that. It's a bit more of a tough life, I think, for that type of creature down there. So,
I would have to say he does. I was going to say he does have to compete with the tree octopus.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Well, up here, you know what? I don't know how Bigfoot up here would last in a brawl with the grizzly bears, because the grizzly bears up here are pretty massive, man. And when they're up on their hind legs, they're 10, 12 feet tall. That's a big, that's a big animal. I mean, I got to admit, I want to see that fight. I would put pay-per-view money into that fight. I really would.
Right. But we're probably talking about two animals that are very territorial, and how often is that clash really going to happen?
No idea.
Again, you're talking about a vast region, so
there's a lot of people.
It's just hard to say.
There's a lot of people, Dave, who believe Sasquatch is telepathic, and I will, no tinfoil hat on, put my hand up and say I am one of them. And I just think there is something extra special about this creature. The more you have learned about this creature, what do you think it truly is?
Well, a lot of what I've delved into in terms of Sasquatch is the Native American lore of these creatures. And the first volume of Wood Knots, I wrote about Sasquatch encounters on the Navajo Reservation in the Southwest. The current volume, my piece is on Sasquatch encounters in Nevada, which, a lot of people kind of shake their head and say, come on, it's all desert. Well, it's actually not. There's a lot of mountains in Nevada. And, again, I went back to a lot of the Native American traditions and lore and spoke to a lot of elders about these creatures. And the stories just go far, far back in the Native oral traditions. And, my stance on it is, and this gets this traditional cryptozoology people really jacked up. When you mention the word paranormal around Sasquatch, you're going to get some people worked up about it, because there's a large contingent of cryptozoologists with a vested interest in believing that this is simply an undiscovered animal. And my stance on it is that it's an undiscovered animal that has some traits that we just don't understand yet, and that we would, possibly identify as paranormal at this point, bearing in mind that simply means beyond the normal. And, one of the things that I often point out is there's a lot of cases of people seeing these things, and they describe a situation where they see this creature moving, and all of a sudden it just seems to vanish. Now, what traditional crypto people call the woo-woo crowd, would say that, well, they're walking through portals, or they're using telepathic ability to, blank everybody's mind or something like that. Well, what if it's something more simple than that we just don't understand? Try to imagine what it was like for the first person who ever saw a chameleon. They're looking at a lizard, and it's sitting on a tree branch one minute, and then all of a sudden it's gone. Because it has blended in now with, with that tree. And, it may be that these creatures have some type of advanced ability similar to that. Or it could be something else that affects the human mind or nervous system or something, because there are so many accounts out there of, there's a fair number of accounts of people who have had one of these things in their sights, in their rifle sight. And they say that that something caused them to just not be able to do it, to not be able to shoot. So, what does that affect from? Is it something that's affecting their consciousness or their nervous system? I don't know. I think there's just a lot of questions that we have to be more open-minded about in order to understand how we may be able to get more evidence on these creatures, because there's something a little bit beyond the simple hardcore physical undiscovered creature aspect. That's my belief.
You know what? I want to challenge the whole woo-woo factor thing, because I take that not personally, but as a little bit of an insult to people who have had some extraordinary experiences that they can't explain. And when I hear the word woo-woo factor, and I've argued that with other researchers on this show, explaining to me, or I will ask them point blank, how do you know? And when they say, well, right, it's just not possible, and I'll be like, okay, that's your opinion. It's not fact. How do you know? They can't answer that. They can't answer.
I agree with you. I actually agree with you. And it's not a term I use. I used it in that context, and I'm sure you understand.
No, I understand exactly how you used it, but I guess what I'm getting at, Dave, is why are so many researchers so quick to tag the woo-woo factor onto everything? Because my opinion of it is probably much like yours and Ross's, that if we're eliminating possibility and theory before we've even investigated it, there's a reason why before I heard one of my experiences with Sasquatch, when I heard the roar, right before I heard the roar, I saw pixelation. The First Nations people in my area believe that Sasquatch can camouflage through pixelation and is either a shapeshifter or interdimensional. So is my situation now woo-woo because it confirmed what a First Nations legend said?
Yeah, it's funny, and it's one of these situations where within cryptozoology or within Sasquatch research specifically, for some reason there is a very radical division between the sort of two camps. And, there's even to the extent that there was, and I'm not going to say names, but there are names that I could pluck out and say, these are like the representatives of these two camps. And it's really sad, because as you're saying, Dave, you know what? You don't know. The one side, they don't know that it's not simply a physical animal that hasn't been discovered. The other side, they don't know that it's not something that has stranger abilities or paranormal abilities that we just don't comprehend yet. Neither side really knows, because we, as a collective, we don't have the definitive answer yet. And, stop spending so much time trying to cancel the other person out. Is it really worth that? This volume of Wood Knots, there's a piece in there from Rosemary Ellen Guiley, who did this amazing piece that pulls in a lot of this stuff. She called it Interdimensional Paraphysical Sasquatch, I think is the title. And it really examines a lot of this potential for psychic communication and for some of the other paranormal possibilities. She cites cases and so forth. And, a guy just reviewed this book on Amazon. He gave it 4.5 stars. The only complaint he had was Rosemary's article. He kind of threw a fit about it. And he goes on about how, well, this is the woo-woo crowd and psychic contact and it's all, and and that's the only thing he's crying about. Clearly overlooking the fact that it's a journal and it's intended to present different, perspectives, different possibilities so that we can all hopefully be a little bit more open-minded and come to some conclusion as to exactly what's going on and what these creatures are, But I see this in all areas of the supernatural. We could easily, have this discussion when it comes to ghosts. But, for some reason, the people within cryptozoology, there's two camps that are they're kind of radical about it, and I've heard it from the other side too, who are just angry that people are trying to say that it's only a physical animal that hasn't been discovered. They get enraged and they say, no, these are, our psychic brothers and all these different things and vice versa. So, yeah, I hear where you're coming from, but, what are you, this is what we have to deal with. This is the community we have to deal with at the moment.
I fully understand.
Curiously enough, now I can tell you that I've had confidential conversations with some crypto guys who they stay in one camp, they stay in the camp that's, the quote, undiscovered animal, but they are open to the idea and not, they stay quiet about the other factors because they'll admit, I don't know.
Well, you know what? I think it's something that needs to have a little bit more attention paid to. I got a good story for you. It happened a few years ago. My neighbor Tony, who we actually found a footprint together last October, and his best friend a number of years ago was driving by a lake, a very large lake up here called Canham Lake, and it's right off a native reserve. And he's driving along this 2-lane stretch of road, and all of a sudden from lakeside, he sees what he thinks is a bear coming out from where the water is. And the bear is on 2 legs. Until the next thing he sees is this giant hand coming across his windshield and shattering his windshield of his car. And then out of his rearview mirror, he sees this creature continue on 2 legs and start climbing up the hill. Now, I thought that was a pretty extraordinary experience. And my buddy Tony was like, he swears by it. He swears by this story. Girlfriend was literally took her seatbelt off, crawled underneath the dash of the floor area where her feet would be, would not get up. She was so freaked out. So this summer on Canada Day, I'm walking around our local museum on Canada Day where I do the ghost tours. And literally, I run into his sister. His sister confirms, she's like, oh, you're the Bigfoot guy I've been hearing about. You're that radio guy, Dave guy. And I'm like, yeah. And she's pointing at me. And she goes, you may have heard the story about my brother and his car and the Sasquatch. I said, that was your brother. So we ended up having this conversation with her brother, or about her brother. I still got to meet him. Haven't met him yet. But it's amazing how it happens. Another friend of mine earlier this year, just a couple weeks before the fires, he actually had a giant rock thrown at his windshield in where he was going to look for Sasquatch. Shattered his windshield. So yeah, it's interesting how that can happen, because I do believe they're territorial, like you said earlier, Ross. I do believe that, but it's to the point where I guess they don't like vehicles very much.
Right.
Or at least North American vehicles, one of the two. So have to try one of them imports going up into the field. So anyhow, gentlemen, you guys were coming up here for the Paracon until the forest fires went and ruined everything. But I got to tell you, just over a week ago, we did our first paranormal tour since the forest fires, because literally the day after evacuation was supposed to be our July tour. And, well, that just didn't pan out. I've got an interesting haunting story for you guys. in the main house of the museum. Okay, the house is separated in two parts. The first half is the museum part, and then the back half is where a lady named Sheila lives, and she's the caretaker of the entire facility. So the evacuation order comes down, and she packs up her vehicles, packs up everything, sets the alarm to the museum, locks it up, and then leaves. Alarm never went off once during the evacuation because the fire really didn't come that far. All right. She gets home. She brings her granddaughter home. And her granddaughter, and you know how young kids, when they're watching TV or movies, they'll always reach their hands in the couch cushions. You know how kids do that?
Mm-hmm. Sure.
So the granddaughter starts doing that. Starts pulling out handfuls of Cheerios. There is not a Cheerio box in this house. Sheila doesn't buy Cheerios, and if she does for her grandchildren, then what she does is she hands the box of Cheerios to Mom before she sends the grandchildren away, because she doesn't eat Cheerios, no point in keeping them, so they go stale. So Sheila then starts reaching into her chair. There's Cheerios. She goes upstairs. There's Cheerios, a couple Cheerios on the stairs. There's Cheerios placed in each of her shoes. So she cleans up all the Cheerios. She's all excited that I come down there, and she's telling me all the Cheerios and everything. And I'm thinking, okay, mice, squirrels, whatever it could be. She's like, Dave, there is not a crumb around. Like you would expect if it was a mice or a rat or a chipmunk or something, or a squirrel, that, they would be chewing them, and there would be, grains of Cheerios everywhere that they dropped.
Sure.
Nothing.
Mm-hmm.
So she cleans up all the Cheerios. I go back there this past Saturday, and Sheila comes running up to me. She goes, Dave, you're not going to believe it. I said, what? She goes, more Cheerios. So I said, what do you mean more Cheerios? She goes, I went into my towel drawer the other day to put some towels away, and the entire drawer is filled like someone dumped a box of Cheerios in there. She goes, Dave, honest to God, there is no Cheerios in this house. So I'm talking to Mike Morin from Haunted Crew of Canada, who's been up here to investigate. And he starts telling me how Ken, the former caretaker, liked Cheerios, apparently. And Ken passed away a year ago in September.
Wow.
So we have a Cheerios mystery that we have to try and solve here. And, I'm trying to remain level-headed, thinking that it could be an animal, but there is no animals in that house. There's nothing. There's a couple of puppy dogs that are like 10 weeks old. That's it. It's strange.
And you said the alarm was set, so no squatter could have gotten in?
Nothing. No.
Okay.
Nothing.
Wow.
Have you ever heard of something like that with cereal?
Not with cereal. My first Cheerios ghost.
I know. It is the strangest thing. But I'll tell you, getting back to, and I'm not trying to make this the Dave show. I apologize, guys. There's the Canadian in me. But when we went back on the tour and we got the tour started again, the spirits were absolutely amazing. It was I've investigated that place probably 12, 15 times now over the last year. And that was the most active I have ever seen that place. So I'm going to ask you, Ross, and then Dave, maybe you can follow up. Do you think, I hate to use this term, that maybe time made the spirits' hearts grow fonder for the tours?
Well, it's very possible. It just seems really weird because even, because me and Dave have been hanging out just recently, we ran into a lot of activity, even on our trip. So it seems like, everywhere it's been pretty active. And I mean, like crazy active. just all these stories are coming in like crazy. So, a lot of people are questioning, whether, the eclipse had something to do with it. So, it's one of those things that, it could be that they missed you, like, hey, buddy, glad you're back, we're glad to have the attention, or, it could be something in the air, it's just been one of those things.
Well, I can tell you this, naturally, right before the tour started, we had a lightning storm rolling in.
Yeah.
Have you had any experience with paranormal activity increasing during a lightning storm?
When I've had the opportunity to investigate a place in that situation, yes. And again, it's that whole theory that, the electricity in the air is definitely feeding whatever is out there. So I truly believe that, yeah.
Dave, what do you think?
Oh, yeah, I think the same thing. I've investigated places before during storms, and it seems to really heighten the energy. I mean, it's a similar theory as, using an EM pump or things like that, things that will charge the atmosphere a bit more and give whatever's there something to, energize it, something to feed on, something to help increase its level of interaction. There's other factors too. I mean, you have to think, you have investigated that place, like you're saying, over a dozen times. So theoretically, it could be that if there is something there that has a consciousness, that it's getting more used to, more comfortable, or that it's going into its quote normal routine, so that it is manifesting when you're around. Like Ross, I've heard a lot of the same theories that people are talking about the eclipse, heightening the energy and things like that. I don't know if that's the case or not. I know that for me personally, I found through the years that there are certain factors that seem to either heighten the energy or dampen the energy. And I think something that often gets overlooked, this is my personal opinion, is the human factor. And that's the idea that some people are just kind of energy killers. They can go into the most active location in the country and nothing happens. And I know that the right combination of people can lead to situations where it seems like something always happens. It's funny, I haven't even had a chance to talk to Ross about this yet, but we were just at a place in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and the amount of activity that was going on was it was crazy. And I spoke to someone yesterday who has also investigated the same location, and they were like, "No, it wasn't that active for us." So, and I always ask them, so what, who was with you? What team members did you have, and who was there? How long you've been investigating with the person? If I don't know. And, Ross and I have been to several locations now together, and I think that, there's a level of comfort that we have with each other, and there's also, I think, that we tend to get activity. There's some people I investigate with that's certainly the case. Dave Spinks and I investigate a lot together, and we get activity where we go. Sometimes it's kind of minor and low key, but sometimes it's just crazy. But this location in Milwaukee, it was one thing after another. And Ross couldn't even sleep the one night because there was so much activity going on. He was
both nights actually.
Well, yeah. So he was up walking as much as the ghost, I think, trying to figure out what in the hell was going on.
Ross,
Oh yeah.
Ross, what makes a good haunting for you? What would you consider a good active haunted house or building?
Oh gosh,
keep it clean, Ross. You're on radio.
For me, just to have an experience for myself. For me to actually, I know me and Dave are going to keep going back to this place, because it's still fresh in our minds, and it was an incredible experience. For me, one of the things that I've always been asked, throughout all the years I've been doing this, and this is, we're going on close to 30 years now, I had yet to see an apparition. That was the one thing I have never experienced. I had seen shadow figures, move across the room, but I've never seen a fallen apparition. Now, this last, investigation that we did in Milwaukee, I believe I saw an apparition, and I kind of want to, be the skeptic at times and say, oh, no, there's got to be an explanation for this, but there's just, there's nothing I can explain. It's one of those things that, just to tell you the story, we're at this, old brothel. David's in a room across from me, sleeping in the bed. I took the couch, and this little living area that I'm sleeping in on the couch, there's a door right next to me with a window, so I can see out into the hallway. And out into the hallway is the staircase that goes up to the top floor. And one of the guys that we were using for our experiments, he was actually pretty terrified. He was having a hard time. He couldn't sleep at all. And when I last checked on him, he kept saying, you know what, I think I'm just going to go to the car and sleep. I can't sleep. I can't. And so I was like, I really need you to stay in the bed, just for this experiment. And so, he was really toughing it out. So, everybody went to bed, and I, kept, every time I kept trying to fall asleep, I'd hear this loud noise. Like whatever was there did not want me to fall asleep. So all of a sudden I hear somebody walking down the stairs and going down the hall, and I had just, turned my head, and so through the corner of my eye, I see somebody walk past the window. And I'm going, great. Michael obviously couldn't handle it. He went out to the car. So I gave it about 5 minutes, and I decided I was going to go check on him. So, I throw my shoes on, I go out, downstairs, and when I get to the bottom of the step, I realize that the door is locked. And it's locked from the inside. So the only way you can lock it is if he had the key. And the only person that had the key was David at the time. So I was like, that's kind of odd. The door's locked. But I didn't put much into it because, again, hardly any sleep. So I unlock the door. I literally go out to his car, and he's not there. I come back in, lock the door, go all the way back upstairs. He's in the bed. And I'm like, did you leave? He's like, no, I'm too terrified to leave this bed. So I literally saw somebody, or heard them, and then saw them. And I was just like, that was pretty amazing. So, to have those unique experiences definitely makes it worthwhile for me. That's for sure.
How about you, Dave? What makes a good haunting for you?
For me, it's those, having been in the field for so long, there's so much that I don't want to say it's routine because it's fascinating every time it happens, but, there are things that you sort of almost get used to, it's like, okay, a million times, people like Ross and I, we've heard unexplained footsteps. A lot of the standard things, the strange knockings, all those kind of things. But when I'm in a location that just has a whole range of things going on at the same time, or when I'm in a location where I'm getting personal experiences and validation on various types of equipment, that to me is really, really cool.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. When you can validate those experiences, that's cool.
Yeah, when you get this sort of divine storm of a range of things happening at once, that's pretty incredible for me. So for me, that's what it is. And I go into this stuff. I'm not in this field looking for a piece of evidence to prove to someone, look, this proves ghosts exist. I just don't approach the field that way. I think that if that's your mindset, more power to you, but you might as well pound your head against the concrete because, you're not going to convince that many people. I think people need to have their own experiences in order to believe. And it's really cool, for me to have been there when Ross saw this apparition. And again, I'm not saying I'm claiming any credit, but I think it's really cool because that sort of supports my theory that the right combinations of people investigating often lead to, things happening. And I'm telling you, the stuff in this location was just off the hook. Now, I had reached out to a few people to find out, okay, is it like this all the time? And that's why it was interesting to me to talk to this person who said, no, we investigated it. Nothing was really going on. So I'm thinking, wow. We had several different people over the weekend that we were there who saw an apparition. And, that's really unusual. And I tell you, as long as I've been in the field, the one that I saw the night that we were there, it still kind of confounds me because it was so daggone solid, and like Ross, I thought that it was Michael walking down the hallway. It was a different night. It was a different occasion. It was on a different floor. It was on the third floor. And it was one of these things where I was putting something down on a little, stand that's in the room, and right in front of me was a doorway that went out into the hall. And so as I'm looking down at this object that I'm putting down, I see a person walk across in front of me, headed for, the end of the hall, which there's a bathroom there. So I didn't pay any attention to it. I'm thinking, oh, it's just Michael going to the bathroom. And I walked into the adjoining room because at that point we were sort of gathering up some equipment. I saw Ross, who was in half of the bedroom and was coiling up a wire or something. And I went and I sat down on this couch, and I asked Ross what time it was. He answered, and then I heard Michael's voice. And I got up and I went into the doorway. And, at this point, it's starting to kind of compute. And I looked at him and I looked at Michael and I said, you just went to the bathroom, right? And, he's like, no, I've been right here. I didn't get out of bed. And Ross is like, no, he didn't, he went from the chair to bed. He hasn't been anywhere. And that's when it all kind of started to connect, I'm thinking, well, wait a minute. Yeah, I saw somebody go down the hallway, but I didn't hear the bathroom door close. And, all these things started to just come out in a flurry. And it was crazy. It was just really crazy. And that was in the midst of a weekend that was just full of a range of activity.
Oh, yeah.
Have either of you ever had what feels like cobwebs dropped on you?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
What is that? Is it an ectoplasm? I had that for the first time at our tour, and my friend Mark had it happen, and another gentleman in the tour had it happen. 3 of us had it happen in one room in the same place. What is that? Ross?
Well, I would probably think ectoplasm would be a good guess. I've had the situation where, I felt like there was a cobwebs on me, and you kind of brush at it and it just won't go away, that type of thing. Yeah, I would probably say, best guess would be something, on the ectoplasmic cycle. Definitely.
Yeah, I think it's something trying to make physical contact, certainly.
We got this one guy in one of the buildings. He dropped ectoplasm on 3 of us on the tour, and last Saturday we did an impromptu investigation because there was a couple of little mysteries that we wanted to try solve. So we went back there on last Saturday, just a couple days ago, and one of the caretakers of the museum, his name is Dan, he came with us for the first time. And he actually got hit with cobwebs as well, and he was literally standing 2.5 feet from me maximum, leaning up against the wall, and we did a search of that room for cobwebs, and the only cobwebs in that room, there was 2, one in each far corner, and that was it. And we were standing by the doorway. Mm-hmm. There was no cobwebs here, and he got hit as well. And I'd never experienced that before, ever.
Yeah, I kind of wonder, too, if it could be ions as well. Because we're starting to do a little more research with the ions for our documentary, and we're starting to find that ions, can affect us, even giving you that feeling like you're being lightly touched. So I wonder if there might be a play on that as well.
And then we come around to the fact of having to question, okay, if it is ions, is it something manipulating them? Or is it happening by some natural cause? Because really we don't know, what these, if they're entities, if they're the deceased, if they're something else, what are they capable of doing? What are they capable of utilizing? How are they communicating?
Or even
how are they
what they're made
trying
of.
to make contact? Or what are they made of? Yeah.
Right.
It was the strangest thing. And no, Mr. Skeptic, on hashtag Spaced Out Radio on Twitter, it was not cobwebs. There was nothing. When you brush them away, there is nothing there. It feels like cobwebs are dangling on you, and when you brush them away, there is nothing there. So I'm pointing at you, Skeptic. You're not winning this one. And your tweets have been, and Snark have been weak tonight. Very, very weak. I'm calling you out. Anyhow, I want to get to a question from Amanda here because I think it's a great question in the SOR Space Travelers Club. She says, do you believe, gentlemen, that those who believe in God are more likely to have negative spirits around than, or even more spirits?
Ross is going to love this one.
I'm not a religious person. I try to be very respectful towards everybody's beliefs. I personally am the type of person that will believe that like attracts like. So if you are a very negative person, regardless of your, religious beliefs, you're probably going to attract negative energy. And so, I don't really think religion has anything to do with it. I think in that case, most religions are pretty much going to keep you pretty much, closed-minded when it comes to some of this stuff, because most people don't want to believe in that when it comes to some of the religions out there. And then of course there are some that definitely support it. So it's a tough one, and kind of going back to a little bit, what David's saying, with the combinations of people might attract some of the energies when we investigate these places. I think intent has a lot to do with it as well, So yeah, it's a tough one, and I try not to get too religious on that aspect. What about you, David?
Yeah, Dave, let's get to you. Come on. We got the fishing line out there, my friend. You got to bite.
So here's the thing. If you're, I think that a lot of your experience is certainly going, in terms of paranormal, is certainly going to be dictated by your religious beliefs, whether those are conscious or subconscious. Because I've talked to a lot of people who, for instance, they were raised Catholic. Maybe they haven't been in a Catholic church in 10 years. But then they have this bizarre experience, and they immediately default to that because it's something that they don't understand, so they're going back to their core beliefs. And if your core religious beliefs are defining those experiences in very specific terms, then that's how you're going to interpret them. For instance, if you come from a tradition that believes that any kind of ghost or spirit or anything else is a manifestation of evil or the devil, then that's what you're going to believe you've just encountered, more than likely. So, I think that religion plays a part in terms of how people interpret their experiences and what they, how they process that information. Now, there's certainly plenty of people that wrestle with that and try to understand, if they're raised Christian and they're raised to believe that, you're not supposed to consort with spirits or have any, dealings with anything like that because it's demonic, and then they have an experience where they believe their, dear departed grandmother came and spoke to them, then you see a real battle go on within that person because they're trying to bring those two beliefs together, or that belief and that experience together and understand it. So, I think I think religion is a very important component when you're talking to witnesses, when you're dealing with individual cases at homes or businesses, because, I always ask, do you practice some, any particular type of faith? Because it will often reveal a lot about what the person is saying to me about their experience. A lot of people will leap to the conclusion, certainly I've seen this a lot in the last 10 years, people will leap to this conclusion that, oh my God, well, there's something demonic here. The devil himself has stepped in. And, I just have a hard time believing that Satan is intervening in the life of Lulu, who lives, down at the trailer park. I really just don't. But when you start looking at her beliefs and her, her upbringing and so forth, you start to understand, okay, this is why she's interpreting this way. What's really going on? What is let's break it down and look at the core experience and try to help this woman. So, I think it's incredibly important. And I also think that those foundations, those beliefs can often dictate what you do draw to you if you go into this field. Because, I have seen people, I've worked with people before who focus almost exclusively on the demonic. And guess what? When they're using ghost boxes or when they're taking EVPs or anything else, that's what they hear. They're getting a whole range of demonic names. They're getting, terms like hell and Satan and so forth, because that's what they're connecting to.
On that note, my friend, we are going to hop out for our final break of the night. David Weatherly talking cryptids and paranormal. Ross Allison coming in an hour too, and he's going to go the distance here as well as we get into more paranormal talk right after this. You are listening to Spaced Out Radio. I am your host, Dave Scott. It's good to have you with us on a great Tuesday night with no moon outside. It is dark. Good night to go stare out at the stars. But wait until after this show, if you don't mind, because we want to have you back for one more hour coming up right after this on the mighty SOR. We'll be right back.
We're getting strange on Saturday nights. Hi there, this is Dave Cruz, and each Saturday, starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern, I will take you on a tour of the weird and obtuse on Spaced Out Saturdays. From aliens to Sasquatch and every tinfoil hat in between, we got you covered. Join us at spacedoutradio.com for Spaced Out Saturdays. See you there.
Not ready for bed on Saturday night? Right after Spaced Out Saturdays, hop on over to S4 with Corey Ruiz and me, Eric Cooper from Forest Moon Paranormal. With S4, there are no limits to what we try and uncover. From government conspiracies to helping clean up the paranormal, no topic is safe on S4. We get to the heart of the matter, of the subjects you want to learn more about. So tune in on S4 starting at midnight Pacific, 3 a.m. Eastern, only on spacedoutradio.com.
Have you had an experience you can't explain? Would you like someone you can trust to look into it? We have just the place. The SOR Sightlines Report is the place for you to find answers. Whether it's Bigfoot, UFOs, Dogman, ghosts, aliens, or anything strange, the Sightlines Report will get you connected with one of our expert researchers to find out what's going on. All of your personal information is kept 100% confidential. The SOR Sightlines Report, a place for you to find the answers you need. Only at spacedoutradio.com.
Hi there. I'm Butch Witkowski, lead investigator with U4 Cop. On the final Monday of every month, you can listen to me and host Dave Scott on Spaced Out Radio's Strange Days. We're going to get to the heart of the matter when it comes to what's happening out there. People are seeing and experiencing things from ET contact to Bigfoot, and I want to hear about it. Your experiences are what we investigators need to help solve these unknown mysteries. So tune in at spacedoutradio.com to the final Monday of every month from Butch Witkowski's Strange Days.
This is Eric Markham, news editor for the Spaced Out Radio's The Encounter Online. We have put together a great team of writers and journalists from all over the world to bring you top-quality paranormal stories, from alien encounters to the latest conspiracies. You won't find any of that fake news here. True stories and top-notch reporting as we look to bring these experiences to the mainstream.
The Encounter online only at spacedoutradio.com.
Do you want to know the truth? Do UFOs exist? Are aliens real? Are the governments hiding the biggest secret in history? We're UFO seekers, and we're on a hunt for the truth. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow along with us as we journey across the United States, visiting UFO hotspots and alien hotspots, trying to document the UFO phenomenon. Catch us on Spaced Out Radio every third Monday of the month as we discuss Area 51, UFOs, and more. And also, don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube.
Patrolling the Pacific Northwest, we are always on the lookout for the strange and unassuming stories that real people are experiencing. Hi, I'm Vincent Zunza from Pacific North Weird. Me and Alexandra Sullivan have teamed to bring to you those odd stories that never seem to make it into the mainstream. Stories so weird that will leave you scratching your head wondering, is this real? It's as real as it gets with Pacific North Weird. You can watch our videos right here at spacedoutradio.com.
Become more intimate and interactive with Spaced Out Radio. Join our Space Travelers Club with your new membership. For $5 a month, we'll provide you with special access to the website, monthly prize draws from books to psychic readings, along with monthly newsletter, private interviews, and more. Sign up today to be part of Spaced Out Radio's experience.
Looking for a place to advertise at a very reasonable cost? Look no further than Spaced Out Radio. SpacedOutRadio.com has an advertising tab that you can click to check out our daily, weekly, and monthly packages to play on the radio, or our website including social media. From commercial spots to banners, we have it all. Check out our competitive pricing today.
Don't have time to listen to Spaced Out Radio live? Wherever you are, the car, the office, the shower, or even if you're traveling, we're right here for you. Each Spaced Out Radio show can be found on iTunes, TuneIn, and on our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio Show. It's the perfect way for you to catch up on our shows. For more information, just head over to our website, spacedoutradio.com, and tune in to us today.
You hear footsteps in the empty room above you. A rocking chair begins rocking by itself. Don't be afraid of the things that go bump in the night. Reach for Spirit Storybox, the iPhone app the Huffington Post UK called the only ghost hunting app you will ever need. Spirit Storybox. The spirits are telling their stories. Are you listening?
Strange creatures lurking in the night, the sounds of wood knocking in the forest, odd happenings right out of a fictional world. These are the reports I love. Hi there, this is author Ronald Murphy, and I would love it if you join me and Spaced Out Radio host Dave Scott the second Wednesday of every month on our journey into the unknown land of cryptozoology at spacedoutradio.com. From Mothman to Frogman and everything in between. Hey, they don't call me the crypto guru for nothing.
It's Cosmic Sundays with me, Elizabeth Anglin, in Cosmic Passport. Let me take you down a 3-hour spiritual journey where we will get into everything from ET contact to Psychic Sundays. It's a journey of listening and learning together with some of the best professionals in their fields. You can tune in to Cosmic Passport at spacedoutradio.com every Sunday starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern.
The views and opinions expressed by tonight's guest and topic of discussion do not necessarily represent the official policy or position of Spaced Out Radio, Spaced Out Weekend, Spaced Out Radio Limited, its hosts, syndicated carriers, or anyone associated with this broadcast. You're listening to Spaced Out Radio with Dave Scott. Follow Dave on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio and hashtag Spaced Out Radio, and on Facebook, Spaced Out Radio Show. Now, back to the program.
A child grew up too fast, went running wild. Now we don't know who to pray to.
Welcome back to the final hour of Spaced Out Radio tonight. I am your host, Dave Scott. Great to have you with us. Tomorrow night on the program, we get a little bit metaphysical. Hollywood psychic Sloan Bella is going to be joining us. We get going at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern time. We're going to see what the stars actually talk to her about when it comes to what they want to know about their future. But actually, it's a really cool story how she actually uses her psychic ability and metaphysics to help people who are on the streets get better. It's a great story indeed. 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern time at spacedoutradio.com. We want to welcome in everyone listening in on WQEE 99 Rock the Key down in Noonan, Georgia, home of The Walking Dead. We are live in New Orleans as well on 107.7 FM, the United Public Radio Network, and spread over 160 countries around the world. Great to have you with us. We're live on KTLK, The Fringe FM, Renegade Talk Radio out of Las Vegas, and if you're listening in on Revolution Radio, remember the Double R Machine is a donation station financed by you, the valued listeners. Head on over to freedomslips.com and donate today. Bill Cardwell has set the password for tonight in the SOR Space Travelers Club. Epalpabrate. Epalpabrate is your password. Epalpabrate. Make sure you use it wisely, Space Travelers, as Bill sets the password each and every night, right here on the mighty SOR. Now, if you want to follow us on social media, you can do so on Twitter, at Spaced Out Radio. Use the hashtag Spaced Out Radio if you want to connect with us live during the show. You got to bring some good snark to that crowd, though. That's the only way you're going to fit in. Now, you can also give our Facebook page a like, Spaced Out Radio Show. You can find me on Instagram, Dave Scott, SOR. Listen to us on iHeartRadio in the United States. Tune in, subscribe to our iTunes channel, and our website is spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you, including joining the SOR Space Travelers Club for $5 a month. You could also shop at our Spaced Out Radio store, pick up a t-shirt, poster, stickers. We'd love to see you spread them around. Watch some Contact TV or UFO Seekers videos. Read The Encounter online. Rock out to some Bumblefoot and so much more. Everything at spacedoutradio.com. Tonight we have Ross Allison and David Weatherly joining us. We're talking all things paranormal this hour with the two experts in this field. And I realize, they'll probably say, well, Dave, there is no experts in this field. It's my show. I can call you guys what I want, and that's what I'm doing. So thank you.
As long as you keep it clean, that's good.
Hey, that's all right. Now, I better get to Robin's question here because Robin, he goes on your tours, Ross, and I'm going to tell you, for about half an hour here, he's been giving me the jabs. Why haven't you asked Ross my questions yet? So I'm going to get to them.
Uh-oh, you're in trouble.
All right. So Robin wants to know, first off, how long have you been wondering if Mrs. Creepy is going to be found?
Oh, Mrs. Creepy. Well, Mrs. Creepy, for those that aren't familiar with Mr. Creepy, who's actually featured in me and David's latest book, Haunted Toys, Mr. Creepy is a ventriloquist doll that actually I purchased at an antique store. And this ventriloquist doll is known to move. His eyes will move, his head will move. And the story is that he was actually created by a retired ventriloquist artist in his retirement years. He actually goes back to the vaudeville days. And he was created in the likeness of this ventriloquist artist, but he also created a female counterpart in his wife's likeness. And what made these dolls a little more interesting is they actually used their real hair on these dolls. Unfortunately, the couple passed away, and after their passing, the dolls were sold as a pair. And so this woman purchased it, and she purchased them, and she put them in her antique store. And she put them, on a back shelf, right behind the register. And they sat there for a good long time, and nobody purchased them, and she didn't have any issues with them until she actually decided to move her shop. And so she had to pack up everything, and she ended up packing these dolls separately. And she put them into storage for a while until she got her new shop and started to replenish her new shop. And when she went into the storage unit to, find some more antiques, she came across Mr. Creepy. But she didn't find what we're calling Mrs. Creepy. But she found him, and of course, she took him to the store, put him on a shelf behind the register, and right away, she just started having those weird feelings like there was somebody standing behind her and watching her. She even claimed to feel like somebody was breathing down the back of her neck.
And then she started noticing that, when she'd come back the next day, his head would be turned in another direction. His eyes would be looking in another direction. She even said that one day, the glass case that he was in was wide open. And it freaked her out quite a bit that she ended up putting him on a shelf at the back of the store so she didn't have to deal with him on a daily basis. And that's when I came into the picture and purchased him, and I brought him to Spooked, and we've actually had our own personal experiences with him moving. And I think it's just one of those things that he's just looking for the female counterpart. Now, I've been in touch with the woman that I purchased, him from her, and she says, she's keeping an eye out for her, but has not found her. So I don't know how long it will take. I hope it doesn't take very long, because I would love to bring these two together and bring some sort of closure to their story.
Mm-hmm. Is it something that you think you'll ever be able to do?
I don't know. Like I said, she's kind of baffled as to why she hasn't found her. She's like said by now, we've had Mr. Creepy for, 5 years now, I think. And she says, by now she would have come across him or her, and she hasn't. So either, somebody stole her, maybe. I'm not sure. That's one of the things that she said, that she thought maybe somebody might have gotten in the storage unit and stole her, because she has so much stuff in that unit that either she's, packed way towards the very back of the storage unit that she just hasn't gotten to, or somebody got in and took her. So hopefully, with the book and the picture of him out there, somebody might notice a resemblance in the artwork and say, hey, this female kind of looks like Mr. Creepy, so let's bring these two together. But I'll keep looking, at least for his sake.
All right, we got another question from Robin, who is asking, what is a strigoi? Maybe I'm pronouncing that wrong. S-T-R-I-G-O-I. Do you know what that is?
What?
Strigoi? Does that make sense? I don't know.
I'm not sure. Maybe because we don't know. I don't know.
How is he? What?
S-T-R-I-G-O-I.
Oh, Strigoi.
Strigoi.
That's from Roman mythology. It's essentially like a poltergeist. It's a troubled spirit that has returned to, kind of wreak havoc. So it's kind of funny he struck up that term. It's not one you hear very often at all. But it's essentially it's a restless spirit.
You ever dealt with any of those?
What's that?
Have you ever dealt with any of those?
No, I've come across the term a lot because it's related to a lot of the really old vampire lore. I might have said Roman, I meant Romania, but it's an old term that was used for the dead that had risen back up and caused trouble in the community. So you go to parts of Romania and Transylvania, and you'll hear them talk about this strigoi that has, returned to trouble a family or plague a community and things like that. And it really, when you get into the stories, it really crosses over a lot with the vampire mythos. And then in later terms, they started to identify just troubling spirits that were more poltergeist-like as a type of strigoi. So it's kind of a catch-all phrase out of that part of Eastern Europe that represents something that has risen back up from the dead that caused trouble.
And we got to go to Transylvania, right?
Yeah, that's right.
I'm in. I'm inviting myself in one of your suitcases. Now, the last time you guys were on, we were talking vaguely about this haunted sex documentary. Do you guys remember that?
Oh yeah.
How did that go?
It's still going.
Still going.
In fact, yeah, that's the whole weekend we're talking about. We were out there, in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, filming the second segment for this. We got one more to go, but yeah, it's going. The book, we're still working on it. It's definitely been very interesting because, as we talk about, our experiences that we had in Milwaukee, the sad thing is we were so focused on, trying to capture phenomena to prove the sexual encounters that these places have been reporting, that, our goal was not to prove that these places were haunted. So we weren't set up to investigate the place and prove that there was a ghost. We were set up to prove that, subject A is going to get molested by a ghost. So here is that situation where we had so many missed opportunities because we had these amazing experiences there that, yeah, this place is haunted, but we weren't set up for it. We didn't have the cameras pointing in the right angles because we have all the cameras pointing at the bed, with our subjects sleeping in it, hoping that, something might touch them in the night. So, yeah, so...
That's a little pornographic, man. A little pornographic.
It's been a fun subject to research and to do all this, documentation. I've really been enjoying it, having a great time working with David, and, we really do mesh great when it comes to, setting up these experiments, and we both get, really excited about these, great ideas that we're, putting out there because, again, no one's really focused on that type of phenomena. There's been a lot of people writing about it and people, claiming to have these encounters, but no one's really been doing the work and trying to prove or even disprove this. So it's been a lot of fun working on it.
Okay, I got to know how you set up the studies for this, because normally we don't go down haunted porno, but we're going to go down that angle right now. And the reason why I'm interested in this topic is because early on in SOR's history, I did an interview with Hollywood psychic Patty Negri, who actually did an article or wrote an article for a magazine that she had been getting clients who had claimed that they had sex with ghosts on the other side. And that some of them were very happy encounters and others seemed very, very strange. So I'm wondering, how do you even set up for some kind of documentary on this without getting too rude?
Yeah, and that's the thing too about this, Dave, is that Ross, I blame it all on Ross. So he came up with this idea, and he said, we kind of plotted out a series of books on haunted toys was the first one, different things, haunted, whatever. And Ross said, I want to do one on haunted sex. And I'm thinking, oh boy, that's really grabbing hold of some firecrackers there, because it's something to navigate very carefully. One of our biggest concerns was that we don't go down this route where it's pornographic or that it's a joke or anything else like that, and maintain, valid research. But at the same time, and, while I say it was his idea, I'll also say, he had a compelling argument in the fact that nobody's really done this. Nobody will look at it, because what happens is that there are a lot of these cases out there, and one of two things happens. Either the people are embarrassed and they don't really want to talk about it much, or two, it gets sensationalized, and it's just kind of something for the tabloids. Oh, such and such claims sex with a ghost. So in the midst of all of that, there are these valid accounts from people who are having often very disturbing encounters where they've been essentially sexually assaulted by something unseen. And, of course, there's a really famous case that's known as the Entity case that dealt with a woman in California who claimed a wide range of attacks. And they even made a film about that one. But the subject in general is not something that a lot of people have touched. So we had to go into it very carefully. We hooked up with a filmmaker, a fellow named Bill Doughty, who's doing a great job kind of looking at this in an objective way. We had a case in Northport, Washington that we went up. It was, again, a brothel, a former brothel that was haunted, and there was a gentleman there who claimed to have been, groped sexually in this location. So we set up some various experiments there, and then recently we went to this location in Milwaukee. And, I'll let Ross talk about some of the ways we're approaching this in order to keep it valid, so to speak.
Well, the thing is, it is a challenge, trying to prove the phenomena of physical, touch. A lot of people haven't done a lot of research in that alone. So when you're dealing with a situation where, okay, now we know subject A claims that he was groped, all right? The genitals were groped. So how do you prove that? Well, with each of our experiments, we're trying to find out what's working for us and what's not working for us. But then you also have to take in fact that, whatever's there may not want to participate in what we're doing. So it's a huge challenge because you're dealing with something that's intelligent because it's interacting with the living. So we've done things like, we'll set up thermal imaging on people. We've asked, if our subjects would be willing to be naked because we want to be able to see if there is any physical touch to the skin. So, luckily the guys have had no problem getting naked in front of the camera. Girls, that's another subject. But we've had, quite a few people, we'll sit there in a room. We try to get them to, engage with whatever's there, to say it's okay, touch me. We've done the thermal imaging. We've done Kinect cameras, and just a lot of other experiments that we're getting ready to try as well. I'm not sure if I should go into all detail because we want to encourage people to watch the documentary when it comes out. But that's the biggest thing is, how do you prove that the physical aspect of this? And so, that's what's been fascinating for me, as me and David work on this is, we're really trying to confront a huge challenge here is what can we do to prove this? And again, the biggest thing is we might have, the right tools, but the fact of the matter is whatever's there, is it going to do it while we're watching? So it's huge.
Ross, how do you come across the ghosts or people who've had experiences with this, lack of a better term, perverse action by spirit, and find the locations as to where this is happening?
Well, thanks to the internet, I was able to, trace a few of these locations. But a lot of it has, been from, cases that have been brought to my attention, like, Northport. They contacted me and said, hey, we've got something going on here. And, of course, the gentleman that we were working with, told me his encounter in the brothel. So for me, that was, just being at the right place at the right time. But a lot of that is just doing the research and finding these places, making cold calls, saying, hey, I realize that here's a business in an old brothel. Would you happen to have any, cases where, people claim to have been, sexually touched by a ghost? So
that cannot go over well.
Sometimes it doesn't. Because there's been a few cases where I've actually called a few places and they're like, no. In fact, one of them was a hotel that used to be a brothel. And I said, hey, we're doing a documentary on, hauntings. And they're like, oh, yeah, we've got ghosts. And I'm like, well, it's on, sexual encounters. And they're like, no. we don't want to participate in that. So, it's just one of those things. You just got to find the right people in the right environment.
Have you ever tried any in Vancouver?
Are we talking Vancouver, Canada?
Yes, there is a.
Okay.
There is, and I'd love for you to contact them, because there is tunnels underneath this restaurant lounge called Balthazar, and it was a 1905. The building was built in 1905, somewhere around there, and it was a brothel that had tunnels running out to the beaches so people could get away if the police ever decided to come on in. And I think it was a brothel around the 1930s or something along those lines. But they are very, very... They fully admit the place is very haunted from its past. But I would highly suggest to you to check that out in Vancouver, because that may add to your story.
Oh, definitely. Definitely.
I will send you a link. How about that? I can do that. The beauty of the internet. The beauty of the internet. We can do that. But I do know that, there are places and ex-brothels where there was a lot of strange things that have happened. So have you found that a lot of people during your investigation were getting spirits that were getting a little randy with them?
Oh, yeah. Well, that last one, like we talked about, the activity was just outrageous. Our subject definitely had an encounter that he just cannot get over. So, yeah, we've been lucky so far. We've got a few interesting hits with our research, definitely.
I do need to ask, do you have to put money on the counter or on the side table just in case?
That would be something that we would try to trigger. Definitely. We've done it.
Really? Now
Yeah.
that I was saying that facetiously, and you're telling me here you're doing that just to see if you could get any type of reaction.
Yeah, David actually brought up a lot of really great ideas and trying to, basically reenact the environment, and I'll let him talk a little bit more about it.
Yeah, go with that.
Yeah, that's something I've had a lot of success with over the years, is doing things to trigger a connection to the time period. For instance, this last place we were researching in Milwaukee, what we did was we had plenty of volunteers that wanted to come and do a party scene, essentially. And this, you got to understand, this location, it was a brothel during American Prohibition in the 1930s. So the place was actually owned by the Capone crime family, and it was, by all accounts, a very active place. It had a speakeasy on the bottom floor, and the top two floors were where the prostitutes were. The second floor is where what they refer to as the B-grade prostitutes were. The top floor was a very exclusive area. It only has one bedroom. It was the area where not the madam, but the woman who was sort of the A-class prostitute would have been. And there's activity all over this bar from top to bottom. There's also a basement at this location. And one of the things that was intriguing about this location was that there are reports of attacks, physical attacks in this location on both men and women. So there are a lot of accounts of women being sexually groped and attacked in the basement. And then on the top floor, there are accounts of men having strange encounters. So what we did, one of the things we did was try to set up the atmosphere. We had some great volunteers who came in. They dressed in attire that was reminiscent of the 1930s. We were playing music from the time period. And we had a group come in and just kind of, act like they were partying for a couple of hours. They were having drinks. They were, they were playing cards. They were listening to music. And we really tried to ramp up that energy in order to invoke a response.
And, you know, I think personally, I think a lot of times this works because I find that in the aftermath of that, there's more activity, and there's often some very interesting things that occur as a result of that. We did something similar in Northport, Washington, the brothel from an earlier period. So we had some folks sort of doing the Old West type period reenactment, a smaller scale. And in that particular situation, we had a woman come in who I told her, I said, look, I said, really play this up. I want you to come in and I want you to take over. You know, let whatever's here know that you're the new madam. You're taking over this location. You know, it's going to be your way from now on. And curiously enough, it seemed to invoke some responses in the aftermath. And this type of sort of role play to heighten the energy and to connect with whatever's there seems to really work, particularly in locations that have a really rich history and you can evoke that atmosphere. The Northport case, we caught something I thought was pretty impressive. We caught a gunshot on recording, and it was it, Ross? It was like 3:15 in the morning or something, right?
Yeah,
And this is, this town, there's like 200 people that live in this town. I mean, nobody's up at 3 o'clock shooting a gun, and it's one of these things. It's so strange. I mean, it's not a sexual assault like we were there focusing on and studying, but it is something that's very connected to some of the lore of that location because there's a legend about one of the prostitutes being shot there.
It does invoke a lot of thought here in regards to the actual sadness. We can sit here and laugh at the topic all we want, guys, but there is a lifelong sadness that goes along with these experiences that these young ladies are still trapped in this brothel having to hook themselves for a living.
Absolutely.
How do you go about explaining the human aspect of all of this?
Go ahead, Ross.
Oh, I was waiting for you. I was going to give you a little more time. Well, it's a huge challenge in what we're dealing with because, the topic itself, sex. A lot of people, still don't like to talk about it. It's very, taboo. And then to have to, go into these places where, you're dealing with, these entities, whether, you're dealing with a situation where it very well could be a prostitute that is still working her trade. But then again, who's to say that that's what it is? We're assuming in this situation. And that's where another, challenge comes into play is like, well, if there is, some sexual, contact here with men and women, it's a situation where we're still, trying to, dig into the research aspect of this as to, what is doing this. In some cases, you could come into, some people will say, well, it's not a ghost, it's an incubus and a succubus. Then you have to bring that to the table. And of course, that's going to open a whole nother, can of worms when you bring in the religious aspect of that. As much as, I want to say that, it's sad to think that, these women are still out there, feeling that they have to, work for their living in the afterlife. It's a situation too where, we're not even sure that that's even what we're dealing with. It's very complicated. It really is.
Yeah, because, again, Dave, this is a topic that really goes pretty far back in history. And the whole succubus, incubus topic is something that I researched extensively at one point, because you go back to, for instance, the infamous witch hunts, and you find a lot of cases, a lot of writing about the succubus who would come and steal a man's energy, or the incubus who would come and try to impregnate women with the demonic children. So really, when we break that down again to, a bare bones strange encounter, here is something that throughout history you find these bizarre attacks by something unseen, sexual attacks by, something unseen on human beings. So, like Ross is saying, we really have to consider what exactly is going on here. What is this that people are experiencing? Is it, we're even looking into the physical and psychological components. We're questioning, okay, is there something physical, that would cause a person, or psychological, that would cause a person to think they're having this experience, or something that would cause their body to respond, completely out of their control, that would lead them to believe that there's something unseen trying to engage them sexually. And it's a tough topic all the way around, but it's something that, again, no one has really looked at, and there are some pretty intriguing aspects to it. One of the things, again, that is compelling is the fact that this goes far back into history, records of these types of accounts and encounters. And, maybe we can find an answer or two along the way.
In regards to succubuses and incubuses, that is a huge problem for a lot of people, whether they are living or dead, because I know, oh my goodness, a good friend of mine, he was with a lady who was just an absolute succubus. He had his property paid for, he had his vehicles paid for, and within 2 years, he had to move out of his house, couldn't afford to live there anymore, had to sell his vehicles, absolutely went into financial peril. And this lady was very much into metaphysics as well, and willing to pretty much do what she wants. Are they really walking among us? Now, it's funny because I don't mean to make fun of this story. We called her a succubus because of everything that just went wrong after she got involved with him. Are we really dealing with these issues, Ross, that these could be humanoid succubuses?
Well, I've never dabbled in that much research when it came to succubus and incubuses. From what I know and what I have researched, of course, succubus is an entity that will, rape and molest men. Incubus is, obviously the male version that, attacks, I've switched that around, didn't I, David?
Yeah. Well, by traditional demonology terms, what you find is that there's a belief that it actually is the same entity that has the ability to take the form of a succubus or an incubus, depending on who it wishes to attack. So, you get into classical accounts that talk about this being essentially something demonic, because bear in mind, again, we're coming from the viewpoint of the church during the witch trials, is where a lot of these accounts, started coming in, and the term succubus started to be widely used, although it is much older. But there was a widespread belief that the forces of evil were sending these entities out to engage people sexually in order to drain their energy. And the whole idea was that, this entity would come in the night and engage the person sexually, and do this repeatedly, night after night, so that all of their energy was completely drained, and all of their life force was drained. So, in modern terms, you do hear people throwing around the term succubus in terms of a living, breathing person, a woman, because they're saying, oh, this woman's a real succubus. She's, draining the life out of this guy, or vice versa, an incubus, that comes in and drains the life out of a woman. And I think that's just a matter of modern usage of a classical term rather than something that's actually occurring. Although, there are a lot of accounts of people who seem to be what we term an energy vampire. They're the person who walks into a room and, their lives are always miserable, and they're more than happy to tell you about how terrible things are for them. And you walk away from that person. We all know somebody like that. You walk away from that person just feeling beat. You're like, oh my gosh, I feel terrible. Yeah. I think that there are a lot of components to that. I think there are psychological components. I think we could get into some more metaphysical components almost, because you look at more ancient traditions that talk about the human energy field. There are people who can draw that energy from another person. So, we see two things. We see the classical version of the succubus, and we see, loosely a modern interpretation of people that are, they're the people that just come in and zap the room of energy. So maybe that answers your question, Dave. I'm not sure if it does or not, but, we're trying to, we're not really targeting that with the documentary. We're trying to stick to this idea that something unseen, whether it is a succubus or some type of entity, or whether it's some type of residual energy even that is trying to engage people, because that's sort of the programming or the recording of what's there in that location. We just don't know. We don't know exactly what it is that's engaging these people, and that's part of what we're trying to determine.
Let's get to a question from Joe here, and he is saying, if you show sympathy to an unknown spirit that you may believe is a child or even a misunderstood prostitute, could they attach to you and become a very bad situation?
Definitely. I think in some situations, they're obviously trying to fill a need, I think in some situations, there's attraction. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, there's lots of different reasons why something could attach itself to someone, yeah.
And bear in mind, it may be manifesting as a child or a woman, but, the truth is we don't know. We don't know exactly what that is.
Have either of you ever had attachments that you've had to deal with?
Luckily, me, no.
I
knock on wood when I say that.
Yeah. First time for everything, Ross.
I know.
Come on, get in the boat already. I'm not even close as long as you in this field. I'm not even close to being that veteran, and I've had an attachment already.
This guy's in all kinds of trouble now that he's investigating with me, so... Yeah.
Good.
Well, I know. It's all who you hang out with, right?
Yeah, that's right. I've had stuff attempt to do that, but since my early days of being involved in this field, I've always tried to be very careful and take measures, to ensure that doesn't happen. I don't want to bring that kind of thing back home. So, it's just something. I think there's a lot of people that are in this field who don't take any kind of precautions or anything. And, whether you're religious or not, there are things you can do to ensure that just doesn't happen.
Well, how do you protect yourself, Dave?
I don't talk about it openly. I have some things that, for me, work on a very personal level. And when people ask, I say, find what works for you personally. Whether it's something from your religious faith, or whether it's something that you can just, believe in psychologically or mentally, just do something that works for you. For some people it's saying a prayer. For some people it's maybe wearing a piece of jewelry that is, blessed or enchanted or whatever, whatever works for you. That's what you have to find.
Have you ever dealt with situations where a spirit, David, just would not let up?
In terms of trying to follow me?
Follow or attach itself to you? Just wouldn't let go?
At locations a couple of times, yeah. Yeah, definitely. And that, you just have to deal with it. Spinks and I kind of joke because there is, we say that we have a phantom cameraman because we were at a location in Indiana, and we had repeated encounters with an entity that was identifying itself as Ian. And at a later date in a different location, this entity appeared to be manifesting again. And, then we were doing live stream events, and people started joking in the chat room. We were literally doing a live stream event one day, and something started manipulating the camera. And the camera was on a tripod, but it started zooming in. The camera would move in accordance with who was talking, and there was nobody in the room. We had a phantom cameraman operating this camera. And, the joke kind of became that it was Ian, but, Ian was coming across, one of the devices at some point. I can't remember if it was an EVP or a ghost box or something. It was just kind of weird, that it happened. But it's not something that seemed to have followed either one of us home or anything like that. So in terms of that, no, not really.
Guys, give me a second here. I just had a bald head move by my window. Let's see what the hell this was. I got my microphone up. Well, my sensor light didn't go off. That was strange. That was a big head, and that moved fast. I'm a little tripping out here. That was clear as day, too. I didn't see a face. I just saw a forehead in the side of the head, and it was bald and grayish white. I wonder if Carl's back.
Maybe it's. I wonder if because we were talking about haunted sex.
I don't know.
Well, you might not get much sleep tonight, Dave.
Oh well, you know what? It's been a while, so no. But on a serious side, on a serious side.
If it happens, film it for us, all right? We need it for the documentary.
Well, I'm going to tell you, I've told you guys the story about Carl the alien at my window, right?
Yeah.
Now, so a couple weeks ago, I had Olaf Phillips on the show, and all of a sudden that same feeling that Carl was around came right through at about 11:25 at night. And I went outside after the show. There was weird shit happening, pardon my language, between my vehicles. I was seeing something about 6 feet walk between my vehicles. Ended up going upstairs on my other patio. And I got on the phone with a good friend of mine, R. Keith Andrews, who's kind of my ET go-to guy. And as I'm talking to Keith, I hear this weird clicking sound going on in my backyard and up my driveway. Never heard it before. And Keith all of a sudden says, well, does it sound like this? And it was bang on what he was doing. Haven't heard it before, never heard it since. And so I don't know what the heck is going on, but I tell you this, man, after the show, I'm going out there. I got to see what the heck is going on, because that was definitely a head at my window. Weird. And it moved fast.
That's what you get for hanging out with people like us on the radio.
Holy cow. I'm telling you right now, if Carl is back, you better have your spaceship back there, because I'm going for a ride. This is ridiculous. I'm like my heart is just racing right now. That freaked me out. That literally freaked me out. Honestly. When you are face to face with an alien, right? Mm-hmm. When you are face to face with an alien, that screws you up, man. Especially when you're wide awake. Never mind this dream stuff. Now, I can't say whether or not it was Carl. I don't know. I got a box right there. The face was behind the box as the head went by. Now I got to remove this box, damn it, because that's going to piss me off. All right. You're going to hear me move my box here. You know, it's all... I had my Marvin the Martian action figure collection of toys up there. Now I've got that moved. So now I've got you. Carl, come to the window, you dirty bastard. Let's see you. You know, but nah, man. If that's Carl, I'm going out after him after this. I'm going out after him. Anyhow, we got about 7 minutes left, guys. Where do you take the haunted sex documentary from here?
Well, we have, like I said, Bill Dottie is actually going to be completing it, hopefully this spring, to follow with the book. And then I believe it's going to be going on Amazon, Amazon Prime. So...
Oh wow, that would be fun.
It won't be X-rated or anything. It's trying to do it very tastefully, and it's like Ross said, it's a difficult topic for people to talk about and look at, and we're just trying to give some people an opportunity to tell their story and see if we can catch any evidence along the way, some of these stranger encounters. And we still looking at doing another case that is more about hoping to get a hold of a case that is one that deals with repeated encounters, because there are a few of those out there, and we've vetted a few so far. It's just been tough to find someone who seems to have a strong set of encounters and is also willing to go on camera. So it's kind of the next level of this.
And I think that's the hardest part, is finding, somebody willing to go on camera, to be publicly, displayed as, hey, yeah, I'm having these sexual encounters. So, and again, like we keep saying, it is a huge challenge, and I can kind of see why, nobody's ever really pursued it. But, there is the excitement of, trying to prove it as well. It's like, okay, what can we do next? Right.
Now, personally, do you guys plan on trying to carry this through to see how many different encounters you can find, or what are you trying to actually solve with this? Is it just the purpose of it happening, David?
Yeah, I mean, we just, we want to open this up a little bit more so that people who are having these encounters know that they're not alone, and hopefully give them, space to realize that there are people they can talk to about these encounters and be taken seriously. Because a lot of these accounts there's a lot of accounts that get posted online, and the person, they almost immediately start to get ridiculed by other people in forums and so forth. And that's tough, man. If you're having these what can often be terrifying encounters, people need to be able to talk to someone in the field who has some expertise in terms of the paranormal, at least to get an idea of what they're dealing with and to be ensured that they're not completely nuts. So, we're hoping along the way, of course, to get some physical evidence so that we can say, yeah, look, people are having these encounters and something unexplained is happening here. Here's some evidence to back that up. Or, we're also open to the idea of looking at this and saying, you know what, we can't find anything with this current set of cases. Maybe there's a psychological component. We just don't know.
Well, a lot of it goes to, being in the right place at the right time. But I think for me, I think with this documentary, I'm hoping that we can at least set a standard in how to investigate this phenomena. Because again, a lot of people aren't doing it, so hopefully we can pave the road for people, because we can't get to all the cases. But at least there might be, somebody intelligent enough and responsible enough to able to help these people in their area that might be dealing with this phenomena. And hopefully they can come to us and say, how do I do this? And we can say, here, this is what we think works the best.
Is it a way of honing a different type of paranormal investigation skill that you're trying to do? Because you guys are being so specific with what you were asking for.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, you have to go into cases like this and say, all right, what's going to work? What specific type of equipment? What experiment? What can we do to hopefully validate these people's experiences? And because the experiences are so unique, we have to take a very different approach. We're not just trying to prove that a location is haunted. There's a million ways to do that. But it's something very, very defined that we're trying to find information to back up. And I think that in itself is very unique. And that was one of the things when Ross approached me about the project. I thought, well, I like the challenge because we can investigate every night somewhere different and walk away with, we got cool EVPs, we had this personal experience and this and that. But now you've got something that, no, we're trying to prove this one particular piece of paranormal experiences. And that, like I said, that's a unique challenge.
Right. And you got to understand, too, it's all trial and error. And the fact of the matter is, too, we might be on the right path with some of these experiments that we're doing, but it might not be happening at that one time we're filming it. So there's, that as well. It's just hoping that we'll have the opportunity to continue these experiments and find out what works.
Yep.
And how has the response been from the people so far? Because I think that's important as well.
And this is one reason why, I brought it up to David and Bill. It's just like, we're in a new era where, sex is more open. A lot of couples want to have open relationships. More people want to not even have labels when it comes to sexuality. So I think we're at a time where people are very open to this. It's not so taboo. We can, talk about sex. And I think that is another reason why we're able to move forward with this project.
Well, gentlemen, we only got a couple minutes left with you, or at least a minute. Tell people once again where they can find all of your hauntings there, Mr. Allison.
Well, you can definitely find me on Facebook at Ross Allison Ghost Hunter, and definitely follow me there. You can also track me down through my organization, A Ghost, which stands for the Advanced Ghost Hunters of Seattle-Tacoma, at aghost.org. Or you can even find me at Spooked in Seattle. I do tours there and own the company, and that's at spookedinseattle.com.
And David, where can people find your work?
And I'm all over the place. Check out Amazon.com for some of my books, like we discussed top of the hour, a new revised edition of Black Eyed Children coming soon on Amazon. Haunted Toys, Wood Knots, all the other stuff's on there, Strange Intruders. My blog is at twocrowsparanormal.blogspot.com. Check out Society of the Supernatural on YouTube, lots of stuff on there. Of course, I'm on Facebook and Instagram and all the social media stuff too. So, check it out. Lots of cool projects coming along from me. Ross and I have a couple other things coming out, and good times. Lots of stuff coming.
Rock on, boys. Thank you so much for being on. You guys hold on. I'm going to wrap this thing up. We got Mr. Ron Bumblefoot THAL playing in the background. Little brother is watching. Bumblefoot is the official music of Spaced Out Radio. Tomorrow night, Psychic Sloan Bella is going to be with us to tell her amazing story about how she helps people get off the streets using her abilities. 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern Time at spacedoutradio.com. I want to say thanks to my team, Everett Thiemer, Eric Markham from The Encounter, Tim Doyle, Jolene Lammers, web design, Catherine James, social media, Bob Davis, our announcer, Kim Gandy, Director of Business Management, and Leslie Mitchell-Clark from LMC Media for helping promote us. You guys rock, but mainly it's all of you in Twitterverse, in the chat rooms, listening at home or wherever you are. You guys are the ones who make this show special on a nightly basis. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll do it again in 21 hours, my friends, because together we own the night. Mr. Bumblefoot, do us a favor. Take us home. Good night, everyone.